Good afternoon. I'm Sibel Bjorklund, the Executive Director of the Johns Hopkins University Bloomberg Center and Vice President of Federal Strategy for Johns Hopkins University Medicine. I'm thrilled to welcome you to the Hopkins Bloomberg Center this afternoon. It's great to see a few familiar faces that we've seen before in some of our gatherings for local officials, including some of our neighbors from D.C., Maryland, and Virginia, along with the rest of you from across the country. We're thrilled to host you ahead of the official kickoff of the Congressional City Conference this week. Here at the Hopkins Bloomberg Center, we convene stakeholders with diverse viewpoints to encourage dialogue and collaboration. We educate the next generation of innovators and civic leaders, and connect evidence-based research with policy development. One way we connect research to policy at the state and local level here at Hopkins is through the Bloomberg Center for Government Excellence. Our experts at GovX help city leaders use data technology and AI to solve problems, reimagine services, and improve the lives of their residents. And we're happy to continue supporting local governments here with events like this. We hope this afternoon will be the start of many fruitful conversations to guide you into the conference this week as you engage with your peers, connect with experts, and gain policy insights to inspire solutions for your own communities. And if this is your first time here at the Hopkins Bloomberg Center, and you are a local or a frequent flyer to DC, we hope it won't be your last. We host a wide range of policy conversations here, from our Bridge series that brings together bipartisan lawmakers to discuss the practical policy solutions they're working on, to our upcoming Science Diplomacy Summit, which brings leaders in science, policy, and international diplomacy together to strengthen global partnerships and address challenges in AI development, health technology, quantum advancement, and more. You can visit our website to see what we have coming up this spring. With that, I hope you enjoy your time with us today and have a fabulous conference this week. And I'd like to turn to Clarence Anthony, CEO and Executive Director of the National League of Cities, to get us started.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Man, I just got stopped by some college students who said, "Are you a freshman on campus? Is this your first time taking classes here on campus?" Yeah, yeah. I still feel it, though. And Sibel, thank you so much for hosting us here today. Being able to be on a campus where learning is the expectation, and the fact that we can, in fact, lead this meeting more armed with education and information that's going to help us to be able to lead our communities is what our goal is for the next few hours. And I got to tell you that Johns Hopkins University and this campus specifically is designed to do just that. I mean, it's not a campus that is way out somewhere where students can't see the life of cities, the communities, the neighborhoods. They see poverty, they see wealth, they see homelessness, they see the housed and the unhoused. And so every time I've come to this campus and you see the signage is intentional, to see the inspiration, to see that, you know, the freedom, the bell of freedom still rings and opportunity still rings. Man, I'm so inspired. So the fact that we are here today to be able to be a part of this environment and this campus is amazing. And I also want to thank our partner who has been investing in city leaders locally, nationally, but also globally. Bloomberg Philanthropic has really done a lot to just help stand this campus up, but also invest in NLC. And we've been able to utilize that investment in this historic moment to really bring about opportunities for education and training and learning for municipal officials. We also, and I've said this before, if some of you may have been in the room, this week is going to be, and I'm just claiming it, it's Sunday anyway, I'm claiming this, that this is going to be a historic week because the Road to Housing Act is possibly up and, in fact, could be passed by the House and Senate. It's already been done by the Senate. But we can be a part of that as well. But also, I will tell you that being here gives us an opportunity to look at cities of all sizes, opportunities for cities of all sizes, large, small, urban, rural. And we have taken advantage of the investment that Bloomberg Philanthropies has made into NLC, but more so cities, to be able to strengthen your ability to be more competitive for grants and to make you more competitive for opportunity. And it wasn't just Bloomberg Philanthropies, but they were the ones that brought together funders to support us. Funders like Ballmer Group, Waverly Street Partners, the Emerson Collection, Ford Foundation, the Kresge, and the local infrastructure hub that many of you are aware of was able to help cities win opportunity, but also to teach them how to implement some of those grant dollars that they got. Because we have had experiences where we found that cities have received these dollars, but the implementation and the use of the grants was very difficult because the reporting requirements are very difficult. But for the first time, we created the National League of Cities, a one-stop shop that helped to prioritize smaller and mid-sized communities to strengthen their capacity. So the results are all not in, but I'm just honored to tell you some numbers. One, so far, $5 billion has been awarded to more than 2,600 cities. Not each of them got $5 billion, y'all. That's not what I said. Cumulatively, 2,600 cities have been able to get combined $5 billion awarded to them. $589 million to those who went through our boot camp. And those were the classes that we had. And 507 plus speakers and subject matter experts were a part of that. And it was a 4-year program. The bottom line is we were trying to build capacity. And we built capacity for almost 3,000 city staff. 63% of the participants were small cities with less than 25,000 population. So it was targeted, it was strategic, and we were trying to make sure it got in the hands of people and cities that traditionally had not gotten grant dollars. The program archives will be available for continued use after March the 31st. So every class, every tool that we gave in the local infrastructure hub, it is going to be available for your staff as well as yourself. So we knew that was going to be successful. It has been successful. But guess what? We're not letting that high impact technical assistance disappear because it took us 4 years to get that muscle. The staff is ready, is organized, the content is there. So we're going to transform NLC University. We have a university portion of the National League of Cities, and we're going to work with Bloomberg Philanthropies and other partners to continue to build capacity, helping city leaders through our university. And we're going to continue to support you all every day to make sure that you get the support. And we're not just going to do that in Washington, D.C. We're going to do that regionally. Okay. Maybe I shouldn't have made that announcement. Well, that's my goal, because we got to get outside. We got to get outside of Washington, D.C. to be able to do that. So luckily today you're going to hear from some great speakers who's going to talk about their ideas and their strategies and the ways in which they're serving their communities in technical assistance and grants. You're going to hear from one of our amazing state municipal league directors from Maryland. Teresa's going to talk about how they are working as well with their communities in Maryland and our mayors. But we're going to have a productive day, and the productivity will come from your engagement, but mostly your partnership with the panelists. And what I mean by that is, and my staff may not like when I say this, if you got a question, let's ask the question, and so that we can learn, so we can share, because that's the most important part of what NLC does, is that collaboration. Y'all have a productive day, and thank you all so much for being here in Washington, D.C., and look forward to hearing the outcome. Thank you very much. Now, Jeannie, I'm going to, was that what you were telling me to do? Oh, and now have Justin to come up, not Jeannie. Come on up. Thank you. You got steps? All right.
Thank you very much.
Come on up.
Thank you, Clarence. Thank you, Sibel, for your wonderful introduction and for hosting us in this beautiful space. My name is Justin Edwards. I'm a Senior Director of Infrastructure and Innovation at the National League of Cities, and for the past 3.5 years, I've been a co-director of the local infrastructure hub. So it's really wonderful to have so many of you who've gone through that program be in the room today. I'm really excited to talk about, our success, of course, and the challenges that we kind of overcame throughout that process, and how we're taking the learnings from the hub and really positioning NLC University going forward to continue to drive impact that we've seen so far. I'd like to welcome up to the stage a couple of folks from the great state of Maryland who've been through our trainings and who can help kind of tease out some of these key findings. One person that we are very familiar with and love their success story, Mayor Benitez from Mount Rainier, Maryland, Teresa Coons from the Maryland Municipal League, and Alan Etzler from Frederick, Maryland. Can you join us up here on the stage here? Thank you. All right, well, welcome to the Bloomberg Center at Johns Hopkins University. Welcome to our Congressional City Conference here in D.C. I know it's a Sunday. It's still the weekend, technically, but I think we are kicking things off with the right discussion here. So, as I mentioned, the Local Infrastructure Hub has trained over 1,400 cities across the nation. It was, at least from NLC's side, the boot camps that we developed, it was specifically designed to help cities small and medium-sized in nature, cities who typically had been left out of this process of direct federal funding to local government. And that really meant that cities needed all sorts of different help. There are mighty, mighty staff inside small cities, and sometimes even the medium-sized cities need critical training on things like data analysis, how to write a budget, how to do benefit cost analyses for certain federal funding programs. And this is where I think your two cities really represent a different type of story, different size of story. And we had terrific engagement with the Municipal League throughout. So thank you so much for that partnership. I want to start a little bit, Mayor Benitez, with your story. Can you give us a little bit of background about Mount Rainier, Maryland, and the program that you did end up successfully receiving an award for?
So good evening. Not to brag, but Mount Rainier is the best city in the world. And it's across the street in Maryland, so about 35 miles away, right? Not even, 35 minutes. But for us, we are 8,500 residents, the highest density populated city in the whole entire state of Maryland. 1 square mile, that many people, right? About 30% plus of our residents use public transportation, other means to say for vehicles. So we have always been very engaged in how do we get people to walk, to take public transportation, bikes and roll, very heavily on that. But you cannot ask people to do that if your streets are not safe, your sidewalks are not safe, and you are definitely have a big Route 1 going through your city that doesn't allow for people to even connect to their community schools. So for us, we managed to win through the heavy help of Bloomer. The first time ever the city of Mount Rainier has won anywhere near the amount, and you guys don't want to hear, it doesn't start with a B, but it's $9.7 million that we were awarded as a city. Staff that is less than 40 people. So I don't have a lot of staff, and half of that is my police department. So it's a very, very limited staff. I will tell you this without no hesitation. Had we not gotten the help from Bloomberg, there's no way, one, we will have applied, and two, even be a contender to even get the money or even know how to utilize it. So I will start with that because I know we have other questions, but that's more or less where my city's at. So in terrain-wise, it's very, very little, right? But we always have the heart and the will to think outside the box. We just needed people that believed in us and also wanted to hit big like we did. So yeah, so that's my Rainier.
Great, thank you. Yeah, definitely. Alan, you represent a city that's much larger than Mount Rainier. You are in Frederick County, and I think from 2020 to 2023, that was the fastest growing county in the state of Maryland. That level of rapid growth obviously creates a lot of strain on infrastructure. Really curious to hear about how you have approached this historical moment of funding.
Yeah, so I'm from the city of Frederick. It's the second largest municipality in the state of Maryland, largest municipality in Frederick County. We have about 90,000 residents, and we have been the fastest growing city in the state of Maryland for several years now. And that's also kind of adding to the local infrastructure needs. Is for a long time we've been a bedroom community in a lot of ways because of our proximity to Baltimore and Washington, D.C. And so we've had to rely on highway travel as part of major infrastructure. But as we've grown and as work-life balance things have changed and remote work has taken effect, so many more of our residents are now also working in the city of Frederick. We're home to 5,000 businesses. AstraZeneca is headquartered in the city of Frederick. And so now we're also having to grapple with the infrastructure challenges of people who want to bike to work or walk to work or use public transit. And so while we joined the local infrastructure hub, this is actually our second technical assistance program in partnership with National League of Cities, and we're grateful for that technical assistance. We didn't join the technical assistance track with a specific project in mind, but what we want to continue learning to do as an organization, as a city, is developing the systems so that when we have a project in mind, we can already be set for the implementation. We can already be set for compliance because federal grants are complex. There are statutory obligations that you have to be able to meet. And the last thing we want to be doing as an organization is having to turn money back because we weren't able to have the system in place to implement those grants. And so what we took from the local infrastructure hub is a lot of knowledge and assistance in being able to build those systems. We've built a grants department in our organization that specializes in doing this at the state and federal level, so that when we get that funding, we're able to make sure that it's utilized as efficiently as possible.
Thanks very much, and I'm very fortunate to be able to teach some of the courses inside of our trainings, and I know that your grants manager, Nicole, has actually taken a lot of our courses, so I've gotten to know her almost personally, which is wonderful. Teresa Coons is the CEO of the Maryland Municipal League. You represent cities across a very diverse state, from the western region to the coastal region, and then the cities here closer to the capital. Teresa, I would imagine there are varying degrees of infrastructure needs across your member base. Can you give us a little bit about what you're hearing from your member cities where they continue to see need?
Absolutely. So good afternoon, everyone. Nice to be here. Maryland represents 161 local governments. We have members as large as Baltimore City. Everyone knows Mayor Scott. He's pretty active in this group as well, about 600,000 residents. One of my towns has 24, and the mayor has 6 people in his family. So this is how small we get in Maryland. We can be from a size of 9,801 square mile. We have less than 5% in the entire state's total land use. But we also are pretty strong in terms of Maryland municipalities. We are bringing in about 34% of the state sales tax revenue on that 5% or less land. Let's talk about infrastructure, and since both these cities are great examples of infrastructure. Maryland is responsible for about 10% of the state highways, yet we receive less than 3% of the total highway user revenues to maintain those. We have over 170 water infrastructures that is run by the cities, not by the state, not by county, and will remain net neutral to actually fund that. We are in a struggle, and we saw that struggle, and the NLC Infrastructure Hub truly, it's changed the way I've led the state league. First, we decided to become an affiliate league of the Maryland Municipal League for National League of Cities, which means everyone, especially my mayor with 24 people, can be now a member of NLC and access the infrastructure hub. One of the best things I think we've done for a league is do that. So every city less than 20,000 has access to this group and be a part of it. We've actually identified, and the gentleman standing up, I'm going to call him out, Bill George, Managing Director. We have established a C3 ourselves. We are a C6 organization. We've now established a C3. It is up and running. It took about a year to get the IRS to turn around and do everything, but we are up and running. And really, the strength of that is, can we help our members? One of the biggest struggles you'll see in Maryland, and we see it in our own infrastructure in our organization, is that we want to help more than just the cities. We have 2 million residents. A quarter of the state's population lives in a municipality. But when we take legislative positions, it's about municipal operations and funding. What about the residents? How do we help those? And so the first campaign was in January. It was December 26th, and Bill called me and said, we need to talk. And so now we are live as of December 26th, 2025. And our first campaign was for Westernport. If you saw the flooding last year in May, we had 200 school students stuck in elementary school who had to be rescued by swift boats. It wasn't a hurricane. It was a storm. FEMA has denied that application 3 times. They had over $40 million in damages. So we have people using their gas stoves right now for heat because they don't have furnaces still. This is a problem, and we need to be able to help our cities who are getting denials from different administrations. And I'll share, beyond the federal administration, Maryland is in a fiscal struggle itself. We have a deficit going forward, structural deficit. Last year in our state legislature, there was $1.2 billion in requests to the state for infrastructure. There was $120 million they could give out. That is what we're looking at. So the C3, it was good foresight by our group to ask for this approval from our board 2 years ago. We need to get it moving. We need to start winning some amazing grants like Mount Rainier to help our cities. But I see NLC and the Maryland Municipal League really as the conveners. We bring you in. We can educate you. We can train the leaders and our staff. We also have 45,000 staff across the state. You know Nicole. That's pretty impressive, by the way. But 45,000 municipal workforce staff in the state of Maryland who don't have that access to training. 113 of our cities are less than 5,000 people, many who don't have cities, or don't have staff. So we are focused on changing that. We're focused on supporting those cities and making sure our small folks know that they're going to get this kind of access to, and NLC has really provided that direction for us.
That's great. Thank you so much. Alan, I want to go back to something that you mentioned about how now the city of Frederick has really created a grants practice inside the city government. Can you talk a little bit about that experience, assuming for a city that is just getting started? Mm-hmm. You're getting started now in an age of what looks very different from 4 to 5 years ago. How would you recommend a city who's just getting started navigating financing opportunities?
Yeah, so for us, it actually went back to when we received ARPA funding, and ARPA was a great windfall for a lot of local governments. And for the city of Frederick, we received $10 million, but we quickly realized that we didn't have the capacity to get that money out and keep track and comply with all of the guidelines for all of the different projects that we were going to utilize that money for. And so it's really been a roughly 4-year process for us. Since we sort of began a grants office in our organization through our budget and administration team. We are very fortunate to have hired a great grants manager in Nicole, but we've also utilized consultants to help us understand, okay, well, here's a best practice for bringing on a grants manager. Here's a best practice for applying to a federal fund. And so I guess I would encourage folks to, make good hires, but also use subject matter experts in how we set up the different departments that really any department you may choose to set up within your organization. Subject matter experts and good hires are really kind of the answer for us.
Yep. Great. We know that this week here in DC is going to be filled with a lot of advocacy, and with advocacy comes a lot of community engagement that is going to inform some of that. When we were in Salt Lake City, Mayor Benitez, you talked a little bit about how you're communicating the success of your project. Would you mind sharing a little bit with everyone here, kind of how that is playing out? Because I think it's really great.
Yeah, I think for us, we have to remember that even if you have a council member of X amount of people, staff 70 people, your biggest advocate are your residents. They're the ones that go out and walk on the streets, drive, roll them back. So for them, they see an immediate impact. So my ask to them was like, if you need to see more funding like that, we also need to be equally as loud. So from point one, when we started, we decided to get a group together of the PTO, artists, religious leaders, business owners. So we decided from the beginning to start building a group that could go back to the community and say, like, this is how we work. This is the information we're able to seek. This is the reason why we got the experts that we had, right? So they could be expressing the opinion of what we were doing. So we put a lot of communication out to the residents, but we also make sure that those surrogates that are able to communicate the message are heavily involved. So for us, it's not just a matter of like, we got the money. We make sure we address it in our meetings. We make sure that, whenever we have an event, even if it's a small portion of the grant that we done, we go ahead and do ribbon cuttings, invite people to come in for them to buy, do a block party. So that way they know specifically what they're getting. And I think for Mount Rainier has been important because we just finished our year one. So we just finished our 1 year report. So it was a very successful team because for the most part, for cities our side, Maryland had to get used to, like any other cities, on how to deal with people, with small cities and what was needed and what was required. So we did hire a grant manager to help us out, but our job heavily is to communicate people and celebrate our wins. And by doing that, people are more engaged on it. And when it came back to ARPA money as well, we make sure to let them know, like, this is directly how we want to be treated from now on. Money directly sent to us as municipalities because we know how to deal with this. It doesn't matter if you're part of association. It doesn't matter what you believe or not. The first people that get the call when you're not, when you trip on something or get hurt is the elected officials and your staff. They're not hitting up the centers first. They will find you. They will knock on your door. They will find you while you're eating food, and they will let you know. So the same way I tell them, you find me, I'll find you, right? And so we celebrate more or less in order to make sure people are aware of, like, this is what it looked like. You guys put heavy effort into this, and this is what we're getting out of it, right? So when we were a little concerned about the grant going over, I was like, start writing letters and start letting them know, like, this is what you want, right? And that has helped, but you need to start engaging your community. But don't always think about just working through it. You need to celebrate your wins because sometimes they come far in between, and if you're not celebrating them, you're just passing by. So when you ask for people for help, they do not know what you're doing and how to connect best. But more or less as we've done, we heavily engage the community for them to know from step one what we're doing, but also like how to go about continuing to advocating for funds. But our number one request has been that whatever amount of money could be found, like, at a federal level to directly be sent to municipalities for us to apply directly. That's what we want because we feel like we know how to handle the money. We know what the needs are in our community, and we don't want, an amount that by the time it gets to us, it's like pennies on the dollar. That does not work for us, right? So your community is your biggest advocate to make sure they're out there, like, letting them know and making those calls. But you also have to team up with other cities, because they have representatives that they might not be very encouraging. Maryland has a wonderful delegation that they're very encouraging to that, but also team up with other cities and say, hey, can you start making calls to your representative because we need those votes as well. But that allows us to be able to bind together, not to do this, at least for the infrastructure hub. I think we're a very close knitted group that I feel that if I need to reach out to any city, even outside Maryland, I could reach out, reach out Justin and see, we need help with this. And aside from the support we get from our league, we also get support nationwide, and any questions that we have or something they have experienced, and we're the same way. Yeah.
I love the soundbite that you just generated. I'm glad that we're streaming this live. Teresa, the local infrastructure hub really, I attribute a lot of its success. We built a learning institution inside our own system. So for every phase that we were teaching grants, we were tracking, where are cities struggling to access data? How are they struggling to utilize that data effectively? Where do cities need the most help? Where are they showing up the most, and where are they showing up the least? We really benefit from our partnership with you because we learn so much that you're able to share with us as well. It's very important for NLC University moving forward to build relationships with more state leagues around the country. Teresa, we would love any advice you can give us on how you actually saw this opportunity and how you engaged and sent some of that info our way, and how we might be able to learn from that process as we go forward.
So every year your league directors get together, and I call it sleepaway camp. It's not, but we spend almost a week together in some setting and are hosted by one another. And one of the directors talked about grants and working with the hub. And for me, I was like, well, how did you become an affiliate? What does that mean? And it really is probably the best conversation I had to date for what is best. And it took having leaders that are next to me. Both Frederick and Mount Rainier are on my executive committee. There's 5 cities, so that's pretty impressive that 2 are on the stage with me today, because it does include an increase to what we are doing in our budgets to make sure we have that access. And it took the leadership of our league saying, yes, we want to provide this for all our cities. When I look at our cities, the biggest issue we have is that the 113 that are tiny or smaller, 5,000 or less, they don't have staff. They barely, I'll give you the biggest example. Our insurance pool is having a really hard time getting a cybersecurity form passed out. They just need it filled out correctly, and they can't because we have people who don't even know what system they're working on. They can't figure out. They have a computer. We have 5 cities that share one person sometimes. It's a different situation than a lot of this country. But I will tell you, we are some of the most engaged people I have seen in our league. We have our annual conference in June. Have been open for 13 days. We already have 400 people signed up. 62 cities are coming. And those are the smaller ones. Because they come to that conference, they learn. We brought the hub out, I want to say 2 or 3 years ago, and said, talk to our members. Tell them what you can do. And I test it that way. So a litmus test for me is the 100 people that went to that workshop, do you think we should put our institutional investment into the hub? And they said yes. And that is where we are today. So I always test out sponsors and partners in front of our members and saying, is this something you think we should be doing? The hub is absolutely something we should be doing. In fact, we copycatted it in Maryland because we knew that we also, as a C6, can't access those grants. We need grants too because we are convening 2,000 officials every year. If we can do a class based off a grant and bring those folks together, we could do so much more for our cities. The progress is there if you allow this, I would say, on top of your advocacy. This to be very clear, when we do get grants at the city level, it goes to the state and the county and then the city, you're losing 3 to 6% each time. Mayor Benitez is absolutely correct. That's number one. When you're on there on Wednesday, we need direct funding to the city. Keep that moving. But the state leagues, the groups like us, we also need to be able to provide and apply for those grants. And right now we can't as C6s. I think that's something that we should be looking at because that helps all the state leagues in the country.
Great. Thank you very much. I want to just really quickly look across the room here. Is there anyone else in the room? Have you gone through the local infrastructure hub training? Raise your hands if you know that your city has. I see. Yeah, 1, 2, 3. Okay. There's a couple. Well, we are committed to this learning process as we transition the local infrastructure hub into National League of Cities University. And as part of that process, I have my colleague Emma Peters, who's in the back of the room here. We would love to schedule an interview with anybody who has been through this process to help us better understand what worked, where did it work best, how can we actually capitalize on those learnings as we transition moving forward into new topics, right? We're entering a new funding atmosphere, and we want to continue to equip city leaders with the skills and the knowledge able to attract and capture some of that new funding opportunity in this age of diminishing grants. So if you do have time, please connect with her. And with that, I hope everybody give a round of applause for our panel as we welcome the next one. Thank you. So up next is Jeannie Milliken-Bonds. She's our senior executive for the Center for Municipal Strategies and Programs. Welcome, Jeannie.
All right, so let me call to the stage Vice Mayor Danny Fleming. Mayor Steve Patterson, Mayor Pro Tem James Mitchell, Councilmember David Hunt, and Mayor Derek Wood. I ended up with all gentlemen. Just like my first year on a town council. Memories. So I'd like to, this is an interesting panel. We have the immediate past president of NLC, Mayor Patterson, and we also have another former president of NLC, Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell. And a diversity of funding in the local infrastructure hub. So let me start with Mayor Patterson, because I think your city and your region had a unique experience with the local infrastructure hub. So I was wondering if you could just tell everyone about how you used that to build regional collaboration.
Yeah, well, that's great. Thank you all for being here. Thanks to the Johns Hopkins and Bloomberg. This is an amazing space if you've not been in here before. I'll try to keep it in Cliff Note version. I believe it was in 2023 when the local infrastructure hub boot camp first kind of launched. It's one of these things, and I'm kind of really speaking to those of you who are first-time attendees to NLC. It was one of those moments where when I found out about this boot camp, as soon as I got home, I spoke to my deputy service safety director, and I said, you will go through this program. And it was 4 months long with content experts all the way along, and you pick and choose what content area you want to apply for. The City of Athens, we've been pretty successful with Department of Transportation, DOT or ODOT, Ohio Department of Transportation funding for infrastructure. But there was something in there, and it was the charging and fueling infrastructure. And I thought that's one of those things we would really like to augment our community with, which is charging and fueling infrastructure, EV charging stations. And so Andrew Chickey, my Deputy Service Safety Director, went through the boot camp. Came out the other end of that training with a remarkable grant. But we started thinking, we can't just keep this to ourselves. So we started reaching out to the mayors that I know in the villages and the other city in Athens County, all of whom we communicate together. And some of them were saying, yeah, we would really dig having a charging and fueling infrastructure, or having a charging station in our communities. And then that was too easy for us. So we started looking at our LDD, our local development district, and started pulling them into, and next thing we knew, more mayors. Again, that was almost too easy, but that was kind of stretching our capacity. So then we partnered with our community choice electric aggregation, which has partners all across southern Ohio along the Appalachian Highway, from Athens all the way to Dayton, Ohio. Next thing we knew, we had buy-in from over 20 political subdivisions, not just cities and villages, but also school districts, libraries. We built out something truly remarkable. We went and applied for both the corridor and communities grant, the two categories under CFI. And out of round one, we ended up getting communities, and that was brilliant. We reapplied with the encouragement of DOT to go after the corridors, and we also got the corridors to the tune of $16.2 million for over 250 charge points from Athens, Ohio to Dayton, Ohio along the Appalachian Highway, which, by the way, is a highway that would never qualify for NEVI or anything like that. So this was just a game changer for us. So that was the success. But I guess the point that I want to share with all of you is that by doing this, it was all built on relationships that we already had from community to community, from school district to school district, libraries to libraries. And it was, again, truly remarkable to be able to pull this together in an area in Southeast Ohio, which has for centuries has lived off an extraction economy, to where people come in, make a whole bunch of money, and then they walk away, leaving our communities to kind of fend for themselves. And this was one of those things, again, where I was saying it was like, for the city of Athens, this is really kind of a next step thing that we wanted. For some of these communities, one in particular, Amesville, has a population of 172 people. Could you imagine? It was, to have a charging station in Amesville was a wish list item. So there's more to the story, which we'll get to later, but it was a huge success for Southeast Ohio.
Thank you so much, Mayor. I'm going to turn to Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell from a very large city, Charlotte, North Carolina. And Charlotte's done very well.
Extremely well,
with
yes.
the local infrastructure hub.
Exactly.
So we'll just have you tell us a little bit about how well you've done.
So first of all, let me welcome everyone to the NLC family. That's what I call NLC. So thank you all for being here. And the first-time attendees, I see your light blue, so really welcome. And I got two colleagues of here who I have to recognize, because back home, no one do anything unless you have other support. So Councilmember Joey Mayo and Councilmember Kimberly Owens are both from Charlotte. So let's talk about a large city like Charlotte. We almost about 890,000 citizens, and we have about 157 coming each day. And we've been very successful that we have received over $500 million part of this infrastructure lab. And reason why, because growing cities have big and major problems. But for Charlotte, main thing we did that I think I want you to take away is we were proactive. And so we had a CAP program that we started working on. We started talking about what other important initiatives that we wanted to accomplish, made it a priority. And then we went out to make sure we got the grant. So let me throw out just some figures that's very important to me as it relates to air and quality and emission. We receive a $380 million grant to make sure city-owned vehicles, we can be sure we protect the air quality in Charlotte. And then don't laugh at us, but we do have railroad crossing in Charlotte. A lot of people don't think that we have a big transportation deal with railroad, and we receive about $3.7 million in that. And more importantly, you talk about connecting your neighborhoods and anti-displacement. And we received over 2 grants, first for $1 million and the second one for $1.29 million. And we particularly are using that for connecting communities, because we hear loud and clear, as your city grow, make sure those who are there can be part of the growth. And so using some of those dollars to fight anti-displacement has been very key for our city.
Wonderful. All right, let's turn to Virginia, Mayor Wood. I know that Dumfries received an award. So tell us a little bit about the award and other infrastructure projects you're pursuing.
First, I just echo the sentiments of the rest of my colleagues. Welcome to NLC, and thank you to Bloomberg and NLC University for putting this on, and Bloomberg for helping to fund this infrastructure hub. I mean, Dumfries is a small community, probably one of the smallest ones up here today, 1.6 square miles, but Mount Rainier got me beat to only 1 square mile.
Oh, don't worry, we have a Hosky coming.
Okay, okay, a little smaller. Yeah, 1.6 square miles with 6,000, and we're going to be probably growing another 20% over the next 5 to 10 years with the development we got coming. But so small towns, we don't lack any type of vision. We just lack the capacity. And what this infrastructure hub and Bloomberg gave us the ability to do was to close that gap in that capacity to bring it together with the vision. And so we're real excited about that, because I've been on council since 2012, and we've just talked about grants. We made it a part of the thing. And so when this came along, this kind of made it a reality for us to be able to have people who had the technical know-how, the writing skills, and had access to really help walk our staff through from start to finish to be able to get there. And so that is been a real plus and a game changer for us. We were able to walk out with one of the DOT grants for sidewalk connectivity. And it's a planning grant, but planning gets you to where you need to go so that you have the capacity to get more funding. And so we're looking at to be able to do a survey with the community, to be able to look at the gaps, become ADA accessible, and to really be able to connect our community to what it is. Because connectivity is one of the things that creates those economic gaps. It's like you got the haves and the have-nots. One side of Dumfries is split by U.S. Highway Route 1. which runs from Maine all the way down to the Florida Keys. And so Dumfries has an east side of Route 1 and a west side of Route 1. And so those connectivity issues actually helps with not only infrastructure, but economic, right, access and economic ability. And so I think it's going to be the real success of this is not just the infrastructure, but what it does to continue to be a catalyst for that community and to bring people together. I mean, safe streets to schools, those communities that was built that back in probably the 70s and 80s where sidewalks wasn't required, where you have these streets where people are walking in the dark on the side of the road. I mean, I walk the community some mornings and I have to get out the way for streets. So this grant, we're excited that we'll be able to access this, and it gives us not access to just this money, but what it sets up for the next coming. So, I mean, anybody who hasn't taken advantage and been through the infrastructure training, here's the soundbite. Get involved and do it now. And do it quickly.
Great. Vice Mayor Fleming, Harrisonburg, Virginia, also won awards, but you've also been able to fill gaps through some other creative mechanisms. I'm just wondering if you'll tell everyone about that.
Yeah, well, thank you. So Harrisonburg is a town of 57,000. We're a university community. We're a refugee resettlement community. So we have about 70 countries represented in our public schools. And we're also one of Virginia's lowest median income cities. And we're in a rural agricultural area. So we have high needs, but we have a hard time generating the revenue to support that. And it's an old city, East Coast cities, lots of infrastructure to take care of. Urban renewal came through our city like many cities, and so connecting cities is something we have to go back and fix that was done to our cities. And so we've focused on getting our staff geared up on how to get grants, right, federal grants. And in the last 4 years, we've gotten over, almost $100 million in grants, 63 grants. We're really good at it. And our staff are really good at it. And when we have a need, we see something, we look at NLC. We say, who's doing something in this area, right? Where can we learn what's happening there? So for us, that $100 million, about $80 million of that is Department of Transportation grants. So that's the infrastructure that we can't do unless we get those grants. So in Virginia, cities are independent. We're in charge of our own infrastructure, everything there. And so of that $80 million, most of that comes through what's called Smart Scale. And so Virginia has a program, it's a competitive program to get money from the Department of Transportation that comes through our state. We got so good at it that the larger cities in Virginia took notice and said, how are they getting so much money? And so every year this program comes up, and there's a board, a Commonwealth Transportation Board that reviews it. And they said, oh, we're not happy that the money is not going from these urban centers out to this rural area. So they instituted what they were planning to do is called small project bias, that they wanted to cut back the money that was coming to us. And so largely generated from the work we were doing. Our staff were so successful in getting these grants down. So we challenged that a bit. There was a vote. As a matter of fact, the vote was 7-6 of the 13 regions to change the formula. Fortunately, our member of the Transportation Board was smart and knew our story. And our story is 20% of Virginia's agriculture exports come from our county. Of the $5.5 billion, 1.2 comes from our county. Then the neighboring counties have another 20% of that. I said, yeah, I understand and I appreciate the challenge in the cities to move folks around. But what do you think is going to happen if there's a gridlock in getting this out? Before that transportation board meeting was over, right before they closed, our member had talked to someone else and said, would you consider changing your vote? And he did. And it went back. So it's important to know your story and to tell your story when you're going after these grants, right? It's very powerful what you have. For us, as an agricultural region, we could tell that story. But everybody has a story. And the folks who are giving the grants, they don't know your story until you tell them that story, right? It's powerful, you're important, and they need to know that. So sell that to them. And then, the Safe Roads for All, the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant. So we have a $600,000 grant for that. And that's really important to be able to go after some of the transportation grants, right? This is how you do your planning. This is how you do kind of your scoping out what your needs are. In essence, it's diagnostic. What do you need? And that can open up larger grants there. And if you want to get good at that, National League Cities Infrastructure Hub or University. That's where you can get the resources. You can learn those lessons on how to do that.
Thank you. And we're going to turn to Ahoskie, representing the small cities, and Councilmember Hunt. I know that Ahoskie took a couple of the classes in LIH and wasn't successful. So tell us what you all plan to do next.
We are the smallest town. The town is Town of Ahoskie. It's the only one. That's our slogan. And today we're the only one that didn't get a grant so far. So,
there's still time.
But there's still time. We are actively applying, and we are taking the tools that NLC gives us and constantly utilizing those tools. There's not a problem to pick up the phone to get help, to talk through the process, get the knowledge that you need to grow. And get to the point where we could get great staff. We are a small municipality. Our town, our population is around 5,000, 6,000 most, 4.2 square miles. But we are growing. We are definitely growing. Our governor just announced in the state of North Carolina a project called Project Green Lantern. $875 million was dropped into a project. $51 million was dropped into a dock and barge, so we're going to have an inland port. So it's important to have connections with the National League of Cities, utilize their tools to go after these grants so we can get these federal dollars, because we are in a growing state and we're growing fast. And without the help of NLC, it would be tremendously hard. So definitely take advantage, join the classes, join university, and don't give up like we're not. We're not giving up. We're going to keep applying and keep applying.
And I should also say Councilmember Hunt is on the board for the North Carolina League of Municipalities, so also important in this. So we've talked a little bit about what you all were successful at trying. It's an interesting group because we've got military connections, university connections with this group. So I was wondering if we could go down the line and talk a little bit about what else is needed and whether there are connections we could use with those universities to help cities continue along this line. We'll start with Mayor Patterson.
Great. I failed to mention Ohio University is our largest employer in the city of Athens. Our population is about 25,000. So to your question, one of the things that I think is really of need, and this is where NLC has been brilliant along with Bloomberg and the local infrastructure hub, is technical assistance with being able to manage some of these grants. Athens, again, I'm blessed. I've got grant writers. I've got Ohio University who can also assist if we're going after grants and whatnot. Very successful at that. But there's a lot of communities that may not have that ability or that capacity. There's also a lot of communities that I've heard from within Southeast Ohio that are saying, great, okay, I can get a grant. My fear factor comes from accountancy of that grant and reporting of that grant. And I don't have the staff to do that. That's where NLC and the local infrastructure hubs really walked into that space with technical assistance, which is about 6 months, a year now that has been one of the features under the local infrastructure hub. And from what I'm hearing throughout Southeast Ohio, that too is a game changer. Because now that fear is going away. We saw the same fear with ARPA. We saw the same fear even before that with CARES Act. If I mess up, then I'm going to get that money clawed back, and then I'm going to be negatively impacted in my community. The same holds true with those who are chasing after some of these infrastructure grants. But I think the real level set for all that is the technical assistance now that we've kind of walked into that space to help reduce that fear by, again, constantly acknowledging that capacity can be a real issue. And now NLC has stepped into that space to help with capacity and to allay that, to go after this direct funding that is critically important. And you heard that earlier today, to where in the past it had to be money that came from the Fed to the state, and it's just trickling down, and everybody's going to take their share. Direct funding is more critical now than ever before, to where you get the full allocation that you're asking for and are able to put that towards projects, especially when we're looking at the cost of projects going up and up and up. Any dollars you start pulling away for whatever reason is going to ultimately put that potentially put that project on the shelf.
Great. Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell?
Yes, first of all, I got to recognize my mayor, Mayor Val Lyles. Mayor, will you playing and stand to be recognized? That's the reason why we get so much love from Bloomberg, because of Mayor Lyles and her leadership. Thank you, Mayor. And so I think from our perspective, once again, we make sure we're going to chase more local infrastructure hub dollars based on our priorities. So as a growing city, we got two key issues for us. One is keeping our citizens safe. And so we encourage, we got a strong bicycle community in the city of Charlotte. We preach about being health and walking, being pedestrian free. So our struggle is, how do we keep them safe? How do we make sure we have less fatalities at major intersections? And so we're looking for more money as we talk about our Vision Zero policy in the city of Charlotte. As we reduce accidents and pedestrian fatalities in our community. Secondly, and more important too, is the education piece, and we talk about making sure our citizens know that infrastructure plays an important part and as it relates to your quality of life. And in the city of Charlotte now, with the growing population we have, we created what we called a 10-minute community that you can work, live, and play all in a 10-minute radius of your house. And with that, though, comes what? Congestion. With that comes more cars. And so for us, it's about how do we use more infrastructure dollars to address some of our corridors, some of our major thoroughfare street network systems. So it's good to be growing, but it's about growing smart. And that's why we rely on so much of what Bloomberg is doing with the infrastructure grant to help us become a city that as you come, your quality of life increases as well.
Mayor Wood?
Yeah, Dumfries is in a unique situation. We're in a state of rapid transformation. We were once probably one of the most overlooked communities on I-95, and now we're going from overlooked to unforgettable. Right? We've had growth from the time we were just looking at the numbers the other day. From the time I took mayor in 2018 to 2025, our real estate tax assessment has shot up 108%. Right? We've brought in three major private partnerships that put it over $500 million of new investment that transformed is adaptive reuse of a landfill, of a construction landfill, and we turned it into 80-acre open park, and on the side that didn't have any landfill, we put a hotel and gaming resort up there with historical horse racing machines, which then took and had the opportunity to almost split the budget, and we almost tripled the amount of revenue that we was bringing in and tracked major investments. So we brought in over 500 jobs with that, and we have about 3 major developments being built, and we just purchased our waterfront last year, right? And so we got, during that process, we did get a grant from the Biden-Harris administration for one of 2 brownfield grants, actually multi-purpose brownfield grants, one of the hardest ones to get. So we got $1 million to put towards being able to look at our brownfields in there and to bring back the Port of Dumfries, because many people don't know Dumfries is one of the oldest continuously chartered towns in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and we had one of the 3rd or 4th largest port in the 18th century. But because of the tobacco farming and stuff, it silted in our body of water, so nobody even knew we had a body of water. And so our challenges right now is going out, securing a bunch of funding to revitalize the port. We just got, not earmarks, congressional directed spending towards, we got to change the name, right? Towards to change. We just got some money from our congressional rep to continue to stabilize, as well as we have a lot of friends in the state government that's able to get it. We've also taken advantage of some of the smart scale and MVTA money. So we have secured another $200 million for transportation projects to begin to Route 1 actually splits in our community. So when you get in Dumfries, Route 1 south splits to one side, and then the north side splits to the other side. And so what the transportation grant is going to help us do is to realign our Route 1 so they can all line up again together. So we'll take the south side and move it to the north side, widen it to 6 lanes, and then we get to take ownership of the south side, which gives us the opportunity to now build something we never had at downtown Dumfries. So the challenge is now we got so much going on at one time, and that's why I say we're in a state of rapid, transformation. We can build a main street, we can build a waterfront, and we got to build an entertainment district, and we got to do it all simultaneously while all keeping the community connected. Also continue to control gentrification, right? Continue to put ourselves in a situation where we have the community to grow with us and to be able to continue to bring those jobs, continue to keep it, because we are in this DMV area, right? So the cost of living is very high. And so we also look at the median household income compared to the region. We're considered to be economically depressed, right? In the county we in, the median household income is roughly $135,000. Our household income sit around $90,000. Which is still higher for the state, but for the region that is in, and the way our real estate values is going, it's pushing more people south, away from D.C. And so we're in a unique situation where our needs are so heavy with the, our FTEs have almost doubled in the last 8 years as well. I went from 25 full-time employees to now I'm close to 50. Of course, 50% of that is still my police department, and I'm inside of a county. And so we got 3 major contracts we signed for urban development, consultants, and placemaking for developing that Main Street small area plans to waterfront, building a brand new community state-of-the-art civic engagement center. So it's going to be the biggest one, I would say, if we needed anything, it's going to be more money in the climate areas of rebuilding that port and reestablishing that port, because upstream, that's going to take a lot of work. But you had to see so many projects working at one time at such a rapid pace. It's where Dumfries is. We're trying to, not just trying, but we want to become that blueprint for small town transformation in the nation.
Great. Vice Mayor Fleming.
Yeah, well, for us, the challenges we face are like a lot of the challenges you face. Housing, and then economic stability and economic mobility. So within housing, we have about 18,000 housing units in our city. We have about a 2% vacancy rate, which is really low. If you know vacancy rates, they like to have 5, 6, 7% vacancy rate. So that's the crunch we have there. And it's across all levels of housing. Of course, at the affordable side, if you want to make a dent in that, then there has to be additional funds that come in for that. It can't happen on its own. We don't have much of a foundation community in our city, and our corporate community isn't. It's agriculture, it's poultry companies, and they really aren't great corporate partners for us. So getting those LIHTC grants, which are really hard and competitive, especially for a smaller city. If you're competing against large urban projects, it can become really a challenge. We can get them. So within those 18,000 housing units, we've approved in the last couple of years 4,000 additional housing units. Yeah, it sounds great. We aren't getting shovels in the ground. We get a couple hundred every year. And some of these projects, are getting the 9% grants, getting the 4%, 9% loans and 4% grants. but they can't get shovels in the ground, can't get moving. The money still isn't enough to get that done. When you're a low-income community, the margins and the rents just still don't add up enough there. So that's been a challenge for us. Hopefully this housing bill will loosen some stuff up. Of course, it's a policy. It's not money yet, but I appreciate that. And then on the job side, we are we have a large service. A lot of our jobs are service jobs, manufacturing jobs. Median income. Our university is our largest employer, and our city is our second largest employer. So government jobs there. And then we have a large immigrant population. Many folks who are over-credentialed but can't apply that in jobs. So building our small businesses is really key and vital for us. So we're now part of a project with NLC, the Southern Cities Economic Initiative, and something that NLC does. They've pulled together the foundations and identified a competitive process. We went through a planning process with NLC that helped our staff plan to put the proposal together. We were fortunate to be selected for one of those cities, and so now we're working with these foundations with NLC in developing our small business initiative targeted at Latino businesses in our city, and to see if we can move them up the scale. If you're a 5-person operation, how do you become a 10-person operation, or how do you make your balance sheet double? What you need to do. And so without NLC and without those foundations that have been a part of this, we couldn't do this. Our budget doesn't have the margins to step into that. Right? The infrastructure it takes up everything for us. So again, just so appreciative of what NLC does on that end. Working with Bloomberg, working with these with these foundations, and building trust. As the cities, what we need, right, and can help us step into that. And it's been invaluable for us, and hopefully we'll be able to continue getting more of these grants. Yeah.
And Councilmember Hunt, we're going to give you the last word on this panel.
All right. For us, some of our challenges right now, we definitely need to expand our wastewater treatment plant. Being that we have this growth coming and it's really impacting us, like I said, we have 4.2 square miles of land. So we really need to be able to expand the wastewater treatment plant. We have the land for it already, but we want to expand that so we can actually put houses, so we can actually build up the housing. And that's going to be very important for us. The companies coming in, they're bringing over 625 jobs. So these people need somewhere to stay. We're trying to grow our Main Street. Hertford County is where Ahoskie is, but we're the largest municipality in that county. So although we only have a population of 5,000 or 6,000 inside city limits, we're talking 20,000 to 25,000 coming in our municipality every day. We're the only one with the Walmart, the grocery stores. So the infrastructure needs are very, very great. And I'm just grateful that the NLC has offered us the tools, even though we didn't get the grant yet. But we're keeping our fingers crossed and know that we're working with them, and they're helping us to make sure we try to get some of this funding that's much needed.
In case you didn't hear it, thank you, NLC. Just in case.
Thank you, NLC.
We're going to keep working on it. So please join me in thanking this panel. And we're going to, I'll let the panel go back to their seats, and I'll tell you a little bit about a change. We're going to show you a quick video of where we're going with NLCU. And instead of this group, as you can tell, there's so much energy when cities start comparing notes and talking about what they're doing. We're going to keep everybody in here with our faculty as opposed to breaking you up, because there's just so much more when you interact. So we'll stay here, we'll watch the video, take a quick stretch, and then go straight into opportunity zones. We're still going to have a reception at the end on the 9th floor outside, provided it's not raining or anything. And so thank you again, gentlemen, and we will roll that video real quickly.
What I have always loved about National League of Cities is the fact that I'm not in this alone, and I get to have conversations with my other peers in my other cities, whether they're small cities, mid-sized cities, or even some of our larger cities, so I can understand not only what worked for them, but what didn't work for them, and we can sit and talk about it. NLCU is just an opportunity for us to convene with like-minded people to get new, innovative ideas, walk away with allies, copy, paste, and steal all kind of good ideas, be innovative, be collaborative, and give us space to where we can make better decisions for our cities, that we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time.
NLC's local infrastructure hub helped win billions of dollars in funding for cities across the country. Now we're taking that success and incorporating it into a new, broader vision for NLC University, with a focus on access to capital, using federal tax credits, tax increment financing, and opportunity zones. Whether you're a town of 1,000 or 1 million, NLC University puts you on an even playing field when it comes to applying for and winning federal funding. And now we're helping cities use other tools to finance their projects and services. When you attend an NLC University event, you'll have NLC's expertise at your fingertips.
Information is the key. In North Carolina, towns that are small to those large cities, folks don't have the time, nor the energy, nor the capacity to start anew.
I love learning that a city all the way in the Midwest is having the same issues as me, and we're both here to figure out how can we resolve it, but more importantly, how can we hopefully resolve it using grant money or funds that our taxpayers don't have to pay for.
We oftentimes want the greatest resources for our community, but everything comes at a cost. NLC does a really good job at helping to navigate where those resources are. More resources, more grants, more support mechanisms. That's what NLC does best. It helps us navigate our needs and finding solutions.
NLC University combines a century of experience with our proven track record of helping cities meet their greatest challenges. The federal funding climate for grants has changed. We're launching in-person NLC University events that will walk city leaders through the complex process of finding, applying for, and winning federal grants. We're making it easier than ever to meet your peers and to learn from their success. This new environment is challenging, but no city is facing it alone.
At NLC University, class is in session, and we can't wait to see you there. I'm going to give everyone 5-minute stretch break, and then we're going to go straight to Preston Frick, who's with CDFA, into opportunity zones, which have now been made permanent. So we need to prepare for that next allocation. And so we'll go straight into that, but let's take a quick break.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I think we're going to get a roll on with the presentation. So thanks for the green light, Jeannie, and if you go take your seats, we'll continue with the education.
All right, everyone, if you could come in and take your seats, we're going to move into opportunity zones. This is an interactive conversation. We have a mic back here. If you have a question, comment, raise your hand, and we'll have someone bring a mic to you.
All right, thanks, Jeannie. In the interest of time, I'll get a roll on with the Opportunity Zone presentation. So good afternoon, everyone. Happy Sunday. My name is Preston Frick. I'm a manager here at the Council of Development Finance Agencies. We're an organization really focused on development finance throughout the country. We're a nonprofit helping communities better to understand how to use these tools to finance their projects and support their businesses. So I was brought today to talk about Opportunity Zones. This was a newly permanent development finance tool that I want to make sure you guys are all well aware of. So just for clarification, I want to make sure when I say Opportunity Zones that you understand this is a tax incentive. It's not a grant. It's not a loan. It's not necessarily a federally funded program. It's a tax incentive, specifically one to focus on reinvesting into certain properties and businesses within qualified Opportunity Zones. Started in 2017. However, it was recently made permanent in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act in 2025. So every 10 years now, we're going to be going through this renomination process for Opportunity Zones. And 2026 marks a really big time for OZs, considering this new permanence. The purpose of OZs is to promote long-term economic growth in these Opportunity Zone census tracts without using direct government funding. So what is an Opportunity Zone? Like I said, it's a census tract is what the borders serve as, and it has to qualify under a couple various data points. One of those being median family income or a poverty rate with the MFI as well. So what happens every 10 years now with this permanence is governors for every state and territory will have to redesignate the Opportunity Zone census tracts within their jurisdictions. So that process, what it looks like is every governor is given a comprehensive list of eligible Opportunity Zone census tracts. From that list, they have to nominate up to 25% of the tracts to become a qualified Opportunity Zone. So previously under 1.0, there was over 8,700 Opportunity Zone tracts, kind of what we're calling this OZ 2.0 period starting in 2026. For this new designation, there'll be around 6,500. So you can see there's going to be over 2,200 less OZs in this new designation round. So it's going to be a little more competitive in trying to advocate for why your community should receive an OZ designation. So just looking at a timeline for 2026, in January earlier this year, the Census Bureau released the official data set in which Treasury will use to evaluate eligible Opportunity Zone census tracts. We're still waiting on Treasury to release the official eligible Opportunity Zone census tract list, so that's yet to come. However, what happened on March 6th was Treasury released a request for comments. This is a 60-day period requesting communities like yourself to look into Treasury's Opportunity Zone nomination tool and provide them feedback for how that process could be reevaluated or implemented differently just throughout the country. So that process is currently open through May. I expect Treasury to probably come out with their eligible Opportunity Zone census tract list sometime in May. So that'll really kind of set the precedent then for governors of states and territories to nominate Opportunity Zone census tracts. That process will happen July 1st, and these governors will have until the end of September to submit their nominations to Treasury. Come November, Treasury will review all of those nominations and release an official OZ census tract list. So January 1st, 2027, we will have an official list of qualified Opportunity Zones. So the next 6 months, understand that your governors are going to be going through this nomination process, looking at all of their eligible tracts and nominating to Treasury which ones they want to become these Opportunity Zones. So it's important for you to understand that so you can advocate to your governors as to why your community should have an Opportunity Zone. So the next part of my presentation is I just want to give you some strategies for evaluating all of your eligible Opportunity Zones, where to look, and maybe how you can talk to your governors and your state leadership as to why your community should get an Opportunity Zone. So like I said, we're still waiting for official list from Treasury that holds all the eligible Opportunity Zone census tracts, but we do have the data set and we have the qualifying factors to determine these zones. So a couple private organizations, which I've listed here, have mapped out some of these eligible Opportunity Zones. So I encourage you to go to these resources, look at your community, and seeing where those eligible Opportunity Zones are. When the list comes out officially, you can find that on the IRS official Opportunity Zone webpage. But in this moment,
or our website, cdfa.net.
Or cdfa.net. You can also look there. That's my boss, by the way. So when you're looking at all of your eligible opportunity zones, you have to understand that your governors are also looking at all of the eligible opportunity zones for their states. So you need to understand that they're going to be probably nominating zones based off of their existing economic development priorities. So what you need to do is try and align or understand how your current ED priorities are aligned with state priorities to try and advocate for those census tract nominations. So, I think a good first place to start when you're looking at these eligible zones, what are your priorities and how do they cross-reference with your state's priorities? And as you're looking at your eligible opportunity zones, you should really think about prioritizing them. If you have maybe 5 eligible zones in your community, try and pick the best 1 or 2 that have the most strong economic, reference as to why they would become an opportunity zone. So when you're looking at these eligible tracts in the neighborhoods, think about the existing industries in there. Do you have existing anchor institutions in these tracts? What are the communities within these tracts? What are their goals as a community? What are the needs in there? Maybe you're already using economic development tools in these eligible zones, and that can help you prioritize which tracts you should maybe be focusing most on. So kind of like I said, we're just working on these prioritization. So as you're looking at your eligible tracts, you just have to think about maybe what economic development tools you're already using there. What are your projects or sites within these tracts that make a strong justification as for why it should become an opportunity zone. If you can kind of draw the dots between projects or businesses already in there and how OZ investments can further support those existing projects, that's going to look really good in front of your state leadership when they're evaluating the tracts comprehensively for their state. So once you have that ranked list, I think a really good lesson learned from 1.0 is some states, they tried to put a zone in every county, or they tried to look at all their communities and put one zone in each community, and that wasn't really strategic because the zones that were ultimately picked in round 1 didn't have a lot of economic activity already occurring in them. So I think, one focus going into these 2.0 nominations is that states are really going to focus on what tracts already maybe have, a supply chain existing within them. What are some tracts that maybe have businesses that are aligned with state priorities. One state we're working with really wants to expand their modular housing development, and they're looking at census tracts that are eligible zones that could potentially play in or strengthen that existing supply chain. So kind of understanding that example is, I think, really important because you need to draw the connections between how your community is obtaining their economic development goals through these OZ investments and how maybe it could play further into what the state's priorities are. And that's another justification for really pinpointing, the zones that have the most potential. If you have 5 tracts and one of them has no economic activity, then you really shouldn't be bringing that to your state's attention because that's just not a tract that maybe is primed for OZ investment. And kind of looking into 1.02, there wasn't a lot of education or knowledge around what the tax incentive was, so communities recognized that they had a lot of potential to get an opportunity zone, but they didn't really strategically say this is the one zone we wanted. And kind of in that process, states maybe nominated zones that really weren't aligned with what the community wanted, and in hindsight, these communities were really reflecting, saying, well, I really wish this zone probably would have gotten the designation considering the projects we have here rather than the one that got it. And, if you look out west towards 1.0, you see some really big opportunity zone census tracts that have a lot of land, but because they have a lot of land doesn't necessarily mean there's a lot of economic activity. So there were workforce concerns there, utility concerns, and there weren't really any projects that received OZ investments in those large areas. So just kind of think about that too when you're looking at your eligible tracts in your community. So I don't know how well I'm doing on time, but looking at 1.0, residential developments were really probably the biggest result of 1.0. OpportunityZones.com, I referenced them earlier. They kind of monitor a handful of funds and put out some data like this. Novogradac does some of that data monitoring too. It's really interesting because there's no real reporting requirements for qualified opportunity funds at the moment, so it's kind of hard to see what projects really received OZ investments, but there's some organizations doing some tracking. And like I said, residential housing was a big result of OZ 1.0. Look at multifamily, specific rental communities too were a big product of these OZ investments. And some theories behind that is because the people who had these capital gains to invest were really looking for the projects that had the best returns. And in that environment, residential developments were really attractive to those investors. Not to say that would be what 2.0 will provide, but just some reflection in 1.0 housing kind of was the breadwinner as far as the sectors that received investments. So I think just a final thought as I wrap up my presentation is let's, under the assumption, go a year from now and say you received an opportunity zone designation. What are some strategies you can do to try and make the most of that designation? So the first step is really holding a community meeting, and you really need to analyze who are the communities and neighborhoods within your opportunity zone? What are their goals as a community? Who are the populations in here? We have to keep in mind that, these census tracts qualify based on poverty levels and median family incomes. These are really sensitive populations, and the wrong project could really have unintended consequences in these zones too. So as you're trying to lead these OZ projects and investments, really keep that in mind that these projects need to support the existing community that's already in these tracts. So as you're holding these stakeholder meetings in your opportunity zones, think about who your community development organizations are, think about who your CDFIs are within your community, who are your philanthropic organizations, who's your chamber of commerce that can maybe connect you to businesses within these opportunity zones. These are all good stakeholders to try and bring to the table as you're trying to build your local opportunity zone capacity. And similarly in these stakeholder meetings, just take stock of what's happening in the community. What's the business atmosphere like in these opportunity zones? What are the goals, like I said, existing within these communities? If you understand that housing is really needed in one of these opportunity zones and the zone is already kind of designated, or I should say zoned for housing, that might be a really clear picture to say, okay, how can we get an OZ investment to create more diverse housing in this community? So that's just one example to kind of take stock and really try and create projects that are based on the needs within your community. Look at your existing economic development tools in these zones. That might help you really figure out where the need is and how other tools can work in tandem with opportunity zone investments. And that always looks attractive when trying to bring investors into your community. So finally, all of these efforts should come together in a prospectus document. That was really popular in 1.0. This is your way to showcase to qualified opportunity fund managers or people with these capital gains that, hey, our community's done a lot of work to prepare around this new tool. We have a lot of, infrastructure in place to make these projects happen. We just need these OZ investments to push it over the finish line. So, these prospectuses should really be positioned in that respect to try and communicate to fund managers and these investors as to why it would be an attractive project for them to come into, and really just showcase how ready your community is and making sure these investors understand the community and population already within these tracts. So it's a really exciting time to be part of 2.0. I think right now the best step for communities to take is to understand where your eligible opportunity zone census tracts are. And as states further come out with their guidance as to how they're going to nominate tracts to Treasury, that's something you'll have to be a part of too. So some states have already started this process. Some states have already had some webinars about how they're leading their OZ processes. Some states haven't gotten that far yet either. So I think you need to look into where your eligible zones are using the resources I said earlier, and you need to figure out what your state's doing behind opportunity zones because they're going to be leading the charge for these designations. So here's my contact. I'm happy to answer any questions if you want to email me or shoot me a call. And I think we'll maybe do a Q&A after this as well. But want to keep...
Hey, Preston, can you just mention, this is OZ 2.0. So some of you probably have a little bit of trauma or a hangover from OZ's 1.0. So what's important to note is 1.0 will end, and those zones will not be automatically designated as 2.0s. Now, you may redesignate the same zone if it still qualifies, but I want to also encourage you to move on from the hangover of 1.0 because 2.0 is different. This is a different game. First off, it's permanent. So it will be redesignated every 10 years. So you are in the game. And number two, there are, for rural places, any of you who are designated as rural, you have a distinct advantage under OZ 2.0 in terms of the incentive. So it is a different game. So I understand you might be a little like, oh, we didn't get much out of 1.0. This is a different game. This is a very different tool, and permanency and these new rules are going to make it a much more beneficial tool to a lot of small places. So just wanted to encourage you on that. I also don't want to say too much more when I get to my presentation, but if you do have experiences 1.0, I'd like to hear about it because I was the author of 1.0, and so I would love to hear a little bit about what you all experienced. I wrote the original framework in 2014 for Senator Scott, which then became OZ's 1.0. So if you do have input, I would like to hear it at some point. So thank you. Maybe afterwards. I'm just kidding. Do you want to do that afterwards, or?
I have no preference about the Q&A.
Why don't we do it after?
let's do it after. Sorry, let me get to your slides before. Yes, please.
Well, while the next deck is being pulled up, I want to say thank you to everyone at the National League of Cities for having me. My name is Florian Chalio, and I'm a director with Arcturus. And I also want to thank Preston, because I actually had a number of slides in my presentation about opportunity zones as well, but because we just got that really good crash course, I can instead pivot to a quick story time that I have a little bit of time for. That hopefully will give you a little bit of context about what I'm going to speak about and how it relates to opportunity zones. So, a little over about 5 years ago, right on the heels of the passage of the bipartisan infrastructure law, I was working with Bruce Katz in the city of Erie to help the city come up with its comprehensive list of investments that needed to be funded. Everything from housing developments in the east and the west sides of the downtown, certain office and retail investments in the city center, investments in resilience along the bayfront and the waterfront, investments in some of the university centers for excellence that could help drive research and further job creation in the area. And we went through, identified all these projects through a long stakeholder process, and then priced them out to say, what would it really cost to fully fund all of these different projects? And the total cost, the total bill that we came up with was north of $1 billion. So I think it was about $1.1 billion at the time. So with all due respect to Mayor Mitchell and the $500 million that you've raised in Charlotte, one of the things that I think is really important that I know is on the mind of a lot of city leaders is how do you take the money that you can get and how do you leverage it to finance and fund the full set of investments that you need across your city, whether those are in housing, whether those are in operating businesses, whether those are in universities and new centers of excellence and resilience and clean and safe streets and everything in between. And part of the unfortunate reality is that, you know, the public money won't fully save you. The dollar amounts that are needed are almost always going to surpass what the public sector has to fund. And so this is what got me into the work that I currently do at Arcturus. We're a national impact investing fund. So we raise money from private investors in the capital markets, and we do our best to put it to work to community priorities in cities like yours through an array of different public-private partnerships, some of which include opportunity zones. So, like I said, I get to skip through all of this stuff about opportunity zones. Thank you again. And so I want to talk a little bit about our investing model, how we've done this in other communities, and how, if it makes sense for all of you, you can use some of these tools either to partner with us or to more broadly partner with private investors. So we're just very quickly, as I said, we're a national impact investing fund. We've been around for 15 years, and we have done a lot of brain damage to figure out how we can work with different types of public incentives, different types of philanthropic incentives dating all the way back to SSBCI 1.0 coming out of the great financial crisis. We've partnered with, we've used the State Small Business Credit Initiative. We use NMTCs. We use opportunity zones. We have partnered with LIHTC developers. We work with foundations to invest through MRIs and PRIs and grants. We have different types of guarantee models that we do with city and state governments and everything in between. The way it works is we, in this little diagram here, we raise these funds, these national funds from private investors. At the same time, we then go to individual cities, state governments, counties, or place-based foundations or major local employers where we raise a small slice of capital that we call catalytic first loss capital or last money out capital. So this is usually around, call it 10 to 20% of the money that we raise that acts in a catalytic position to help get our private investors be comfortable investing in some of these projects in your communities. So once we've raised those types of capital together, we then make impact-focused investments in different communities. The criteria for which we co-create with either your mayor, with other local public, private, and civic leaders. And then those investments if everything goes well, they create local impact, things like the creation of new affordable housing units, the creation of living wage jobs, investments in certain infrastructure like broadband fiber, sewer or wastewater systems. And those investments are structured also to make our private investors happy and drive those impact outcomes. So, this is a model that we have done. Sorry, I'm skipping ahead here a little bit. This is a model that we've done in communities across the country. So we have a program in Colorado with the Colorado Health Foundation, in Cleveland with Cuyahoga County, in Pittsburgh with the R.K. Mellon Foundation, in Maine with the Finance Authority of Maine, and Baltimore with the Able Foundation, and several others. And in the time that we have done this, now in our, skipping all around here, apologies, in our portfolio, we have created or retained about 5,500 jobs total. We've built or planned or are under construction north of 2,300 housing units, over half of which are affordable at either the 120% workforce range or below. And we've constructed over 5,000 broadband fiber passes, all in low-income rural communities. And so if I could say a little bit about why I think this model is important, or why it may be attractive, is that it really allows a city to take a small amount of money and, if everything goes well, turn it into a considerable amount of investment. So the first loss capital that I talked about, we typically work with cities that come in with maybe $5 million or a $10 million commitment of that capital. We, from our national funds, then pledge to invest a multiple of equity on that capital. So if a local partner comes in and says, we're willing to put $10 million on the table, depending on the market and the types of investments that we do, we might say we'll invest an additional $20 million, or in some cases we'll invest maybe an additional $40 million. So now you're up from $10 million to $30 million, or maybe even to $50 million. And that's just equity. For those of you who know your finance quite well, if you're investing in a housing development, you can usually get 70% loan to cost on that structure. And so you may be able to turn that $50 million into $150 million of total investment. So this has become a very powerful tool where cities or local entities that have small balance sheets but are willing to put that money, they're willing to bet on their community, they're willing to take a risk and say, we will put this money, we'll put our money where our mouth is, we are willing to take a risk if it means that we can bring in a tremendous amount of outside capital. It's a tool that we have found to be particularly powerful, and right now we've had the most success using it with the Opportunity Zone incentive to make sure that it is going into low-income communities across the country. So, I want to bring this back to where I started the story, which is in Erie. And so there's, as I said, it's a town of about 90,000 people that has had and still has quite a few economic development needs. That said, Arcturus has put a lot of money to work in Erie. So what started with a $5 million pledge from the Erie Community Foundation allowed us to make from our national funds investments in the first new housing units in the downtown in something like 20 years, the development of a majority minority-operated food hall, a grocery store and a food desert, a parking gym, a parking garage, and a climbing gym, all which we have built in a 1 square mile radius of the downtown, which we did in partnership with the Erie Community Foundation. But the story actually gets a little bit better. So when we started this process with the Erie Community Foundation, we then started talking to Erie Insurance, which is the only Fortune 500 employer in Erie. And they said, hey, we're an insurance company. We have a lot of capital gains all the time that we need to invest into different things. And we send pretty much all of that money to money managers that are out in New York or out in California, and they're just investing in venture capital and things that don't really benefit us here in Erie. We've wanted to invest locally for a very long time, but we have not had the type of structure or the confidence to invest in some of the deals locally because we don't have a investment partnership and we don't have an institutional investor that we can partner with. So they saw what we were doing with the Community Foundation. They said, you know what? We want to be a part of that. We want to be a part of the investment to the community, and they made a commitment to invest as part of that national fund with a side letter that we wrote saying we would specifically put that money to work in Erie. So not only were we bringing outside capital from the capital markets to bear in Erie, we were also helping mobilize local capital that was going to other parts of the country at first. So if this is something that interests you, I would ask you to reach out. We are looking to launch several new place-based partnerships like the ones we have in Erie and elsewhere in the next 2 years, hoping to maybe sneak one in before Opportunity Zones 2.0 starts. And then we'll certainly have more capacity as the 2.0 program begins. But I want to sort of wrap up with just a note about partnerships in general. While we really like our model and we find that it's been, powerful, and I want to partner with every city that's in the room here, I do think in general it is important to think about how do you go from some of these specific grant programs or some of these specific tax incentives to instead focus on how can we help leverage what we have to bring the capital, the private capital markets, to help us in our investments and in our pursuits. And I would say I have 3 lessons for this. The first is be willing to take a bet on yourself. A lot of the time, to be totally frank, institutional investors, they're scared. They're scared of losing their money. They're scared of investing in a town that they have not heard the name of. I can say that as someone who grew up in a town of 10,000 people that none of you have heard the name of. But if you care about your community and you believe in it, be willing to take that risk and say, we will put this money up. We will take some of that risk away so that it can bring the markets to invest in our community. And the second thing I would say is that, you should be okay bending the rules, but don't break them. And what I mean by that is there are lots of different types of funding from the grant programs that you all have learned about through the local infrastructure hub that are eligible for only very specific uses. But some of those things you can't break the rules, but sometimes you can be a little creative in bending them, in getting them to work towards the things that you want. The most famous example of this is someone who unfortunately did it very well in the city I now live in, New York, Robert Moses, and I think he has a lot of problems, but one thing he was very good at was getting money and doing it for the things that he wanted. By little things like saying that he would build roads he would use park money to build roads by calling the roads parkways. Roads that go to parks. Suddenly he had a whole new type of funding that allowed him to build roads across New York City. Something to the tune of, I think, like $700 or $800 million. Now, I'm not saying you all should, take your park money and build it in roads, but that spirit of creativity is one that I think is still useful today. And then, let's see, I had a third lesson. The last one is, just more generally, don't be afraid to be the facilitator, not the protagonist. Sometimes, it's very easy if you're the mayor, if you're sitting in city council, to think of yourself as the protagonist that is going to drive a lot of investment. But in reality, a lot of things take place in cities that, are done by the university community, or they're done by private investors. And some of those things, can be really good if you partner with them and you choose to be a facilitator rather than, insisting that everything goes through you. Now, you certainly should still have a seat at the table, and you certainly want to direct things to make sure that they don't end up, in certain uses or, causing displacement or other things that you don't want. But don't be afraid to be the facilitator and accept the power that comes with that. So, thank you.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone.
Excuse me. Can we just pause here in between all the presentations? Yeah, let's do a quick round of Q&A real quick while some things are still fresh in people's minds. You want to start?
Yeah, I'll start. Okay. Oh, definitely. Great job, gentlemen. First two. Yeah, he did a wonderful job.
It's all downhill.
Well, it's funny. My city manager put me on this track. He made sure I was going to get into this track because I'm the go-to OZ Economic Development Commissioner. First, kudos to my fellow colleague on the West Side. I serve on the South Florida Community Land Trust. We need land in South Florida. We don't have it.
in Broward, Dade County, Palm Beach. And so we need land. And the land we do have, it's unaffordable. It drives costs. Okay? Thank you. He was able to develop some property and rehab some property in her expensive area on the west side. It's an expensive city, but we was able to do something for those areas that are not as wealthy. Now, first question is the land, all right? Either I'm a facilitator or I'm going to bring it in. It doesn't matter to me. I need to develop a side in my city, west side, to connect to our downtown. Our Tiflis CRA is downtown, but we were able to get development going because we was able to bring private investors, not the OZ, private investors, who understood in the first 1.0 how to leverage some dollars because they came from the first Trump administration. So they came down, did a big hooray, hurrah, fanfare at the OZ Zone Conference with the new Secretary of Housing, all right, last year. So all this is in place, and I'm glad to see the 2.0. So I will be looking forward to the map. I will be contacting you first, too, and I want to wait, well, three of you, because all three you discussed, so we waiting on you. Give me my card so we can get into further conversation. But the thing about it is the land, cost of land. I am afraid of relocating a lot of residents because I don't have the jobs, okay, in that workforce area. And that's a big problem on the west side. And if I have to develop that area, because it needs it, because it's a food desert, and they want to connect to our downtown because all the developments happen downtown and not on the west side. So I'm caught up in the policy dilemma, but I'm ultimately going to go for growth and jobs and clearing that food desert. So we'll be in conversation. Sorry, it's more a statement than a question, but, you could comment on that. Thank you. All right, yeah. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Dr. Chris Harvey, Mayor for the City of Manor in Texas. One question I have is around the build-out, the transition from Track 1 to Track 2. I will say 65% of the area we're trying to invest in now is in Track 1. And then in Track 2, when I was looking on the maps, the likelihood of the kind of that new area is north of that area and more east from the area that we're trying to invest in. How do we, and I got a couple of clips from their slides. I would like to, figure out how we can advocate for that one area, because in that one block area, there are 3 smaller tracks that are now kind of broken out as individual tracks on the 2.0. That's one thing. How do we advocate and get out of the MSA? Because we're a small city, and because of that connection to the county and the Austin MSA, we now, our MFIs are now calculated with them. And so when we're looking at our per income, we're at, we had an increase, but we're still under $30,000 per individual. But in the MSA, we're at 102 in some areas, some tracks, 134 in some other tracks. And I think that poverty right now decreases dramatically, which now dequalifies us from that, a significant portion of the city.
So yeah, I think we can all say, I think we've seen some, at least I have data concerns around what census has already put out, and then also the qualifying factors. And I think a really good point to understand is that we're still waiting for the official eligible list from Treasury. And being that there's a public comment period, we've been trying to promote to people saying like, hey, we understand you have this data concern. There's other places in the country too where they feel like the MFI doesn't accurately represent the population. And there's quite large margin of errors too within the census data. So there is, I think, an argument to be made that these just spread within the data could be used for justification to qualify other census tracts. So through this request for comments that Treasury currently has opened through the CDFI fund, we've been promoting people to say, hey, you should make this point like relevant in your public comment submission, saying that these data doesn't really accurately represent the MFI for these census tracts. Here's why. Here's the margin of error for the census tract. This is why we recommend you reevaluate, this zone. So I think that would be my immediate reaction. And we're still just waiting for Treasury to release that list, right? There's a chance that Treasury might have more favorable interpretations considering those margin of errors. So there's still that potential, but I would say your best bet right now is to submit a comment through their request.
We're good? Okay, let me try it again. Good afternoon. So you all know that we're the only two things between you and alcohol. So you're going to have to listen to some new markets tax credit conversations. My name's Toby Rittner. I am the president and CEO of CDFA, where I've been for 22 years. I've been doing development finance for 26 years. This is everything that I do and know. So if you want to talk later about other development finance tools, bonds, TIF, tax credits, revolving loan funds, opportunity zones, PACE, what am I forgetting, Preston? Something in there. Special assessments, we can talk about all those things. But today we're going to talk about, oh, I think I went the wrong way. There we go. We're going to talk a little bit about there's really 5 areas of public finance. This is just a slide. And if you give me your card later, I'll send you the presentations. We're going to talk about this third area, investment tools. Investment tools like tax credits, opportunity zones, a program called EB5. These are all designed to bring outside investors and their capital to your community. So you may or may not know these investors. You may be partners or you may not be partners with them. They may be institutions who have investors like Arcturus. Or they might be someone that you do know, but they have a need. They have some sort of investment need, but they're not going to do that for fun, right? They're going to do that for what reason? To make some money, right? And they need an incentive. So tax credit programs were created as a response to, we have really tough parts of our community. How do we incentivize an institution, a wealthy person, a wealthy investor, a fund to bring their capital? We need to give them an incentive. And so there's 2 things we always talk about in a transaction, debt and equity, right? Debt's the money you're going to borrow, and equity is the money you're going to bring. Every transaction we talk about needs to have that component. And what we do is we create tools that mimic equity. We create tools that are debt. So tax-exempt bonds are debt. It's the debt side, right? You guys issue bonds in your communities for infrastructure. That's debt. But you can also do tax increment finance, or you can do revolving loan funds, or or developer notes, other types of debt instruments. And then you need something to mirror or mimic that equity. A tool like a tax credit can play that role. So what we want you to realize here when we're talking about tax credits is that this is a specifically designed tool to get that investor to invest in your community where they otherwise would not be investing. That's a key part of this whole thing. They're not coming for fun. They're coming for return. And this tool allows them to bring their capital to that project. All right, this is the most embarrassing slide I have. Let's talk about Taxation 101 really quick. Taxable income, portion of your income that is subject to taxation. You might like this one. It's like that.
I love this.
It's like the basics of tax. Tax deduction, right? These are the things that we get that help reduce our taxable income. What's your favorite one? I have 3 of them. Yeah, child tax deduction. Pretty nice, right? Huh? And then you have your tax rate. This is the rate with which you are taxed. And then you have your tax liability, right? This is after we factor taxable income, deductions, tax rate. We get some sort of a liability. Your liability can be positive. That's when we get the refund, right? And we're really excited. Or it can be negative. That's where we have to pay Uncle Sam. So you and I, in this room, we're all just kind of hoping we get a refund at the end, and we're pretty happy when we buy a new TV or a toaster or something. But a lot of investors have liability, and that scares them because maybe they've got, maybe I had last year $1,000 I had to pay. Well, this corporation or this bank or this institution has $100 million of tax liability, and they're not seeing that as a great return. And so they want to figure out, how do I reduce my tax liability? Well, I'm going to go make some investments in certain instruments, like a new market tax credit deal or a historic tax credit deal, or maybe an opportunity fund or something that's going to give them a piece of paper that says, here's a tax credit. And then when I go to pay my taxes, instead of paying them $100 million, I'm going to give them $100 million worth of tax credits. Everybody on the same page? I made that really simple. It's not that easy, but I try to make it just, basic on the sense of understanding why there's a desire to have a credit to begin with. So what we do is we have investors who make qualified investments, and in return, they get a tax credit, a piece of paper that said, thank you for your investment. Because of that investment, here is $1 tax credit. And they do that enough times to satisfy their tax liability. Now, this has to be done. So remember back in the old days, if you look at my beard, it's really gray. Back in the old days, remember tax incentives were kind of like, we're going to invest $100 million. Hey, state, give me a tax incentive. And then the $100 million investment never happened, but they still got the incentive. And so this is different. This is a demonstrable. You have to demonstrate it. And you get professionals here that are going to monitor and make sure every dollar of that investment is made so that we can then award that tax credit. So a lot of times you'll hear people say, oh, this is a scam, this is a fraud, this is tax, what do they call it? Corporate welfare. It's not. This is finance. And so what we like about tax credits is it's very, very deliberate. It requires demonstration from that investor and from the partners in the transaction in order for awards to be made. It's very, very difficult. Have you ever really seen a major fraud in new markets? I mean, there's little ones, but...
There was a good one on renewable energy that made the cover story in Atlantic Magazine a couple of years ago. Yeah.
So he's got one. I mean, he and I have been doing this a combined, 137 years at this point, but there's not a lot of fraud because of that demonstration piece. Now, I want to tell you a little quick story. I know I'm going fast, and I apologize, but I want to tell you a quick story. Everybody remember the good old days of Clinton and Bush, right? Right? It's hard to believe it was that long ago. But New Markets tax credits were passed in the waning days of the Clinton administration. As a matter of fact, I think it was December 19th. At the very end of his administration. So like on January 20th, the new president is coming into town, and they meet on the steps of the White House. This is the rumor. I was around, and this is the rumor of what happened. And some of you electeds will understand this because you've had that transition of power. Mr. Bush, shook hands with Mr. Clinton and said, Mr. Clinton, is there anything that I can do for you? Can I do you a favor? They do that. That's the exchange. And President Clinton said, will you make sure that New Markets tax credits becomes my legacy and preserve it and protect it? And President Bush took it very, very seriously. I noticed because I went to the very first New Markets tax credit event that was ever held by Treasury, and President Bush was there. That was way back in the day. That was after they wrote regulations and did all that stuff. And the president said, I always felt like it was my obligation to preserve this tool for President Clinton. And this tool is very bipartisan. Over the last 25 years, it's been regularly reauthorized and renewed, not by Democrats, not by Republicans, but by them together. This bill is regularly introduced, it's approved, and we get billions and billions of dollars of allocation made available. But something really cool happened in one big, beautiful bill act. We got it permanently authorized. So this is a big thing. I don't care if you take anything else away from maybe that story, that Clinton-Bush story is kind of fun. Maybe take this one away too. For those of you that were not part of the New Markets game before, the landscape has now changed. You are in the game. So there's probably a lot of you in here, maybe you're smaller communities, maybe you're less resource communities, maybe you're big communities that just couldn't get your arms around this. You chose not to be in the New Markets game because it was never permanent, right? It's hard to invest in something that might not be around in 10 years or 5 years. We have seen that. That's kind of a proven outcome of the lack of permanency. Well, now it's permanent. So you can go now and start thinking about what your strategy is because maybe you don't win today, maybe you don't win next year, but you might win in 3 years. And 3 years is not that far away when you really think about it, when we're talking about the potential to get 40, 50, 60, $100 million of tax credit allocation to bear on the projects in your community. Now, it's important to know, here's just some websites. I'm going to blip through that. Mention how it was created in 2000. We're going to talk a little bit about, I'm not going to be technical. It's a 39% credit collected over 7 years. We can get super technical. If you want to spend 2 days with me, I can give you the intro tax credit course and the advanced tax credit course because we teach them. So feel free to give us a call on that. But really what you're trying to do is you're trying to attract an investor who has tax liability to make an investment in your very disadvantaged census tract so that they earn that tax credit, right? This is as simple as the mechanism is. It's just complicated because you don't really want to sit down and do all that math. That's pretty difficult stuff. That's why you hire pros. The pros are going to do it for you. And they're going to get paid out of these transactions. So keep that in mind. Now, we have this thing called a CDE and a CDFI. You've heard those terms, right? I want to make something kind of clear. CDEs are who win the allocations. So a CDE applies to Treasury for an allocation. You probably think you have to be a CDFI. You don't. So CDEs and CDFIs are separate. A lot of CDFIs are CDEs, but a lot of CDEs are just CDEs. In fact, many of the ones that I know and know very well have nothing to do with CDFI work. They're just CDEs. I sit on the board of a CDE, the National New Markets Fund #1. We have won, I think, all but 4 years of the system in 20-some years, and we have deployed hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars of capital through our CDE that I sit on the board of. So first thing I want you to think about is you do not have to go out and start a CDFI, but you might want to create a CDE. So let's talk about that. What's the benefit? We talked about the tax benefit, the structure. The investor's not investing in the project. They're investing in the CDE. The CDE is this entity. The CDE is then investing in the projects. So what this does is this allows your CDE to become what? An equity-like vehicle, right? Bringing equity to the table so that you can attract that private sector or that tax-exempt bond or that tax increment financing debt, some other type of debt. It answers part of that equation. The results is that we're able to get capital into places where capital otherwise wouldn't penetrate, and we're able to have performance over a 7-year period because we require our investors to be involved for a longer period of time. We don't want like this in and out type of investor. We want a more committed investor. And again, we put on the end here, we like to talk a little bit about how it acts like an equity tool in this process. Now, how do you know if you have a census tract? This guy was right on his computer. He's looking them up, right? He's like, address. So go to these websites. This isn't a secret, folks. These websites have been around for 20 years. Go to these websites and put your address in. That will tell you if that piece of property is in a new markets tax credit census tract. That's step number one. There's nothing we can do for you until you figure out step number one, right? This is also a map that shows opportunity zones. It's the old zones under 1.0, but you can certainly, there'll be a map for 2.0. Now, the question is my zone qualified or my tract qualified? Yes, it does. So there, step number one. I would ask this question. How many of you know your NMTC eligible census tracts? We got one guy. One guy in the audience knows. You know a couple of them. I know opportunity zones. Know opportunity zones? Yeah. That was that speaker. Okay. Nah, I'm just messing with you. No, I mean, I want to ask you something. This program's been around 25 years, and 2 people might know their NMTC qualified census tracts, right? I mean, that's an important takeaway right there that maybe we're not even looking, and we need to look first. The next thing is, you've determined it's a tract. Now you got to start prepping that site. You got to start thinking about what could go there. You got to do all those strategies, planning, site development, and then what are you going to bring along? Are you willing to do a TIF on it? Are you willing to issue private activity bonds? Are you willing to issue tax-exempt bonds for the infrastructure? What is your community willing to do? And if you say no to all those 3 things, then don't bother with looking it up in the internet, right? Because we can't make these complicated, distressed community projects move forward if the community is not willing to help invest in some of the stuff that is not fun, right? Cleaning up brownfields, tearing down old buildings, rerouting utilities, all that stuff that developers hate that's really expensive. We can help finance that, and we can do that through our debt instruments because we are now putting our stuff in order here. We know we have a census tract. We're willing to do some public finance, risk or non-risk based, right? We have strategies for that. And then ultimately, I just gave you a list of tools. Y'all, I wrote the book on this. I have a book on every development finance tool there is. There's 18 more, 19 more. We can talk all day long about We don't have we have P3 on there, but yours is one of those models. That's a great model. You know, bring that to the table and say we have Arcturus as our investment model, and now we can start bringing some tax credits to the table. Now, this is my last couple slides. I tried to do a little Hamlet, I think. To CDE or not to CDE? Is that Hamlet? That is the question. So you're saying to yourself, this guy's crazy. Thank you. I know I am. But you're also wondering, well, how do we start? So there's two approaches. There's the allocation approach. Do you want to go after an allocation? Where's the Charlotte people at? I saw them. You guys go after, I bet Charlotte's a big city. They probably will go after an allocation, right? I don't know, I'm just making this up, right? They'll create a CDE, and then they'll spend the money to hire a consultant. They'll write their application, and they'll go after an allocation, and they'll win. And that allocation will become the property of that CDE, and then they will use that allocation to sell those tax credits to raise money to put into projects. Now that's Charlotte. Charlotte has a little bit of an advantage, right? It's a big state, it's successful, it's growing, they got a lot of resources. But you all might still be in the same boat there. This is a tool for you, right? I'm from Cleveland. I was born and raised in Cleveland. Cleveland can do this. I grew up in rural Ohio for 13 years. Rural Ohio can do this. And so allocation approaches, we're going to actually go out and try to win an allocation. Now, I'll warn you, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I'm right. You're probably not going to win the first year. Probably not going to win the second year. But you might win the third year. Maybe the second year.
Yeah, it's gotten a lot harder.
It's gotten a lot harder.
It used to be easy back in the old days.
Yeah, but it's hard. But what you're doing is you're preparing yourself. You're preparing your sites. You're preparing your census tracts. You're creating a model in your community where you support development, and you will do what it takes to go out and win one of those allocations. And it's permanent now, folks. So you might not win this year, and you might not win next year, but you really could win in 3 years and get a huge allocation of tax credits to bring to bear on your community. If you don't think it's possible, I'm going to give you an example here at the end. The other way is, and I like this way, the solicitation approach. So you don't want to go through all that. Your community's not resourced, and you don't want to go through the headache and the pain to potentially not get an allocation, so you go the solicitation approach. There are dozens. You probably know the numbers. How many national?
I don't know how many there are, but this is what I did, right?
Yeah,
Cities
that's
would
what he
come to me
does.
and
Yeah,
say,
right here.
Yeah, bring me some new markets allocation.
So he does this, and I sit on the board of a national CDE. We have allocations, right? We go and we're like, I'm constantly telling people, you guys got a project? Come tell me. I'll put it in our pipeline. I'm not promising you'll get it, but what I can do is put you in our pipeline. I was down in Lafayette, Louisiana, little town in Louisiana. They're building the Louisiana Music Hall of Fame. They came to me and said, do you know anybody with allocations? I said, I sure do. I introduced them to 3 national CDEs. They won an allocation. They got a solicitation. They now have an allocation from one of those CDEs to help fund the Louisiana Music Hall of Fame going on in Lafayette. So these groups are all over the place. How much did we just award? 10 billion?
It was 2 rounds
Two
put
rounds.
together, right? So it was bigger. So
I think
it was
5 and
10, right?
5?
Yeah.
$10 billion was just awarded on December 23rd, 24th. So that means there's a lot of CDEs out there. Guess what they're looking for right now? Potentially projects.
And they've got to move their allocation fast so they can be ready for the next application.
So my last little bit there is, if you don't want to go the allocation route, which I understand, you got to go the solicitation route. You got to go meet these people. You got to get to know who they are. All their names are on the CDFI webpage. I know all of them. You probably know all of them. There's regional ones, there's national ones, there's state ones, there's local ones.
We're also one of them.
Oh, are you one too?
Yeah.
Did you just win?
We did.
What'd you get?
$60 million.
He's got $60 million of allocation. His name is in the contact book there, and we'll give you his email at the end. So all I'm telling you is to get off your butt and go do this now, because it's permanent and available, and it will be until someone in Congress tells us it's no longer permanent. Which I can tell you what, Congress is really good about making programs. They're not really good about stopping them. So I don't anticipate this will ever go anywhere. Now, if you don't think you can do this, this is my pride and joy. This is the Development Finance Authority of Summit County, Ohio, the Akron part of Ohio. I wrote 2 of their strategic plans, and in one of them I said, go out and become a CDE and get a new markets tax credit allocation. And look what they did. They now have 2 new markets tax credit allocations for its 17 county area in Northeast Ohio. This is Akron, Ohio, one of the toughest, roughest places in America, where they have had 50 years of disinvestment and Goodyear leaving town and all the rubber industry leaving. And they're doing miraculous stuff here with New Markets tax credits because they just decided we're going to go get it. We're going to go make it happen. And they're great at it. And I'm happy to always introduce you to them because I think they are one of the best CDEs in the country for how they do their use of tax credits. And they do this with like 7 employees, right? 7 people on their staff. So, some strategies, understand the tool, get educated. This was not enough, folks. I think I did 18 minutes. And so you got to do a lot more. Run through these later on. I want to hand it over to my partner here. Appreciate y'all listening to me today. It's all yours, sir.
All right. Thank you. All right. So the bad news for all of you is I've got about an hour's worth of slides. And it's been suggested by some that you wouldn't mind giving up the reception and sit here and listen to me. But I have determined that we're going to try to keep on schedule. The good news is they're mostly pretty pictures. I want to be able to show some examples of what you can do with these financing tools. And we can talk about the details, but we can also just look at them, and that might go a little faster. This was a great lead up. I feel like you got all the intro to these programs that I would have given you. This is what I did. I ran a CDE for about 12 years, did deals all over the country. I was also the general counsel to this LIHTC developer. And so I'm going to show you some LIHTC and some New Markets projects and some kind of related stuff, a few before and afters. And I tried to pick out some things based on projects that you might have in your communities. So let's take a look. Basic challenges of what do you got to do? Bottom line, enhance your municipal tax base, right? Get these properties working again. This is one, it's awfully basic. You know this already, but I put it in for all the students I talk to. Risk and bad returns means your deal doesn't work. If it was safe and profitable, someone would have done it already. This is all about, as we talked about here, finding other people's money to do your hard deals. You get subsidies. You change the look of properties. We're all finance people, but design issues are remarkably important in this stuff if you want to make it work. And you're trying to create a virtuous cycle in your communities. Skipping over, lots of boring charts. All right, abandoned factory, 1902. Anyone here from Baltimore? All right, do you know the Hohen Building? Yeah. This was a great one by a local Baltimore developer. I think it was great. You may not agree. We can compare notes on that later. They took this abandoned factory building and they put in a Center for Neighborhood Innovation. They couldn't get for-profit tenants, so they rounded up a bunch of not-for-profit tenants to make it work. Local Strong City, Baltimore. The builders came in with an apprenticeship program. One of the local universities showed up to put one of their centers in. $28 million deal, $24 million in New Markets allocation, some historic tax credits, both federal and state. A little comparison on how all the programs work. Bottom line is important. Highly competitive programs, not competitive programs. Not competitive ones are nice when you can get them. New Markets and LIHTCs are both extremely competitive these days. Modernizing public assets. Housing. Anyone from Tampa Bay area? All right, this was Bradenton, Florida. This was old school barrack-style public housing. Built 40s or 50s probably. Terrible site planning. Flooded like crazy. Redeveloped. Some Hope 6 money. That was an old federal program. It's been replaced by the RAD program. LIHTC equity, market debt, and some TIF financing from the local government kicked in to help make it work. Massive community redevelopment. You want to make it look like Florida, right? That's the goal. Like, pick where you are and do stuff that is aspirational for the people who are living there. This one turned out really nice. One thing we learned in developing this, these beautiful paint colors do not do well under the Florida sun. Needs a lot of repainting. Little sidebar on the LIHTCs. We talked about them. Developers compete for those. You can have them for new construction or rehabs. Tenant population has to meet the income requirements. It's primarily working low-income families. You do have the Hope 6 or the RAD structures or or Section 8 overlays for the very poor. But this is mostly working folks who just need somewhere affordable to live. Design issues I mentioned. De-risking spaces, cues for livability. This one was here in D.C. That was the old Ellen Wilson dwellings. If you go down by Barracks Row, there's like Michelin-starred restaurants and stuff there now. That's what used to be right around the corner. That is now no longer there. It was replaced with the townhomes on the bottom. Mixed income co-op structure. It's been very successful. More sort of bad design language, just for illustration. Anyone from St. Louis? This is, in my view, one of the great failures of both housing and community development policy. That was the Pruitt-Igoe building, went up in 54, they blew it up in 1972 because they thought it was so terrible. And then they left it. The green spaces on the right there, that's what's there now. 50 years, nothing built. Downtown St. Louis. This is one of our local examples right here in D.C., over in Northeast, far side of the Anacostia. Time magazine, back when it was an actual magazine, called it a murderous, filthy, broken down slum. My company worked with the tenant organization to reactivate this neighborhood, redesigned it. This was pre-LIHTC investor equity. That's when people came in just for the depreciation money. A lot of Fannie Mae subdebt, a lot of good local government support. For sale townhomes along with it. Architectural details, very important to giving people that sense of livability, like this is a safe, up-and-coming community. Baltimore, again, did a lot in Baltimore. Berkeley, severe underinvestment in Berkeley for decades. This was actually a great program by the city government and the housing authority. City government took a lot of the tax foreclosed properties, put them in a collection, gave them to the housing authority. The housing authority did an RFP process, selected my company as the lead developer for it. And we had this deal where we would take the properties down, redevelop them, sell them, and at that point the housing authority would then get a share of the purchase price. So they took a little risk on it. We brought in all the outside financing. And the city got the benefit of it getting back on the tax rolls. Again, goal was to recreate the row home structure, bring back some of the historic buildings as apartments. I talked with some folks earlier about the problem of NIMBYism. That is not just a wealthy suburban phenomenon. The residents in the Berkeley community were very uncertain about the idea of more affordable rental property. They wanted for sale property. They wanted homeowners to come in and help stabilize the community. We had, I think, 3 years of design and community discussions around what should this look like, what should the mix be, how should it work. And that's why we ended up with things like the townhomes that are there on the side, which were developed as for sale housing. This worked really well while we had enough subsidy to keep the prices down. Once we ran out of subsidy money and they started getting priced up, it got very hard to move them. But the neighborhood, you know, it's still Berkeley, but it's been a big transformation. Sidebar on housing affordability. I love this chart. We're not going to spend a lot of time on it now. If you're at all interested in this sort of thing, look up this Federal Reserve Board of San Francisco economic letter. What this shows you in a nutshell is housing prices are moving with average personal income, not median income. That's why no one can afford a house. There's a lot of talk about zoning these days and how you got to get rid of your zoning to produce more supply. They're saying the research says that's not the story. That may be a talking point from my friends in the development community. More charts, catalytic investments. OpenWorks, Berkeley, again, Greenmount Avenue. I don't have a before for this, unfortunately. This was a cool thing. You mentioned the Able Foundation earlier. This was one of their projects. Local foundation in Baltimore thought the city needed a makerspace. They spent a year doing sort of a best practices survey of makerspaces, and then sponsored this one. So this is affordable working studios, houses artists, small business people, does a lot of job training, does a lot of school, continuing education, microelectronics, 3D printers, all that stuff. Here, very affordable. New Markets deal. We talked about the new market stuff. Don't need to talk about that much. Key part, the financing structure requires that it's got to be able to carry some debt to make it work. That's one of the hard things about new markets, and that is a limiting factor along with the availability of the tax credits. So there's another one. Maybe some of you have old tobacco warehouses in your communities, if there's enough. It looks like the Charlotte folks have taken off. This was one in Durham. Redeveloped the historic tobacco warehouse. Duke University came in to take this space for their innovation district, lab space. This was an interesting one where the new markets did not pay for the whole thing. It was just a piece of the financing. They had a lot of private investment that came along with it. Another example, which I have to show off because it's a mile from here, and while you're in town, if you have any interest at all, you should really go see this. This was the Randall School redevelopment. 1920s era old school, vacant for years, was a homeless shelter at one point. City had it. Very complex disposition process. It was going to go to the Corcoran Museum. The Corcoran Museum went bankrupt. It ended up with us. This turned out to be a fully privately financed project, but we used the new markets to bridge it, to do the acquisition and all the pre-development design work, permitting, all that stuff that needed doing. What did we get? We got a contemporary art museum out of it. Super cool, 32,000 square feet. This is the Rubel family, Steve Rubel of Studio 54 fame. This was his brother. They have in Miami a big art museum of their own down there. This is another wing of it. Really cool contemporary collection, nothing else like it in DC worth seeing, and it's free to DC residents. Those of us who do not live in the district pay. And we also got a 492 separately financed apartment building. Gallery 64, turned out really nice. Anyone from Memphis? One of my last examples here. Okay, this was Court Square Center. This was the historic downtown. The Lincoln American Tower. This was I think, 2/3 replica of the Woolworths building in New York back when it was built. The Lowenstein building, old high-end department store, fallen on very hard times. 21-story high-rise, 35,000 square feet of office and retail, 75 market rate units. This was the second new markets and historic twin deal in the country, I believe. Insanely complicated. Skip down to the bottom, $1.3 million in legal fees on this. As one of the lawyers on the deal, that killed me. $50 million in other project costs to actually get the thing done. This included $9 million in insurance proceeds. 2 months after closing, we had a little fire. The whole thing went up. But after a year of wrangling with the insurance team, the money came in, and it got finished. So you've got a nice historic tower there, and you've got a brand new LEED Gold certified building next to it. Great historical details, went into the historic tax credits. I was going to talk a little about emerging structures. Let's skip over the complicated ones. I want to give you a quick sidebar on one of my new favorites, community solar. I stole this slide from one of my clients. This is a solar installation on the roof of the Brooklyn Army Terminal building in New York City. This was this enormous building they built to have a place for the troops to ship out to Europe in World War I and World War II. You could pull entire trains into that and offload everybody onto the docks. And it's got a nice big roof for solar. Small deal, tiny deal, like $2.5 million. But it's throwing off discounted electricity for hundreds of local low-income families. That's money those people have to spend on things other than their electric bill. Local businesses, going out to eat, childcare for their kids. Solar is difficult because the market is so balkanized, different utilities, different regulators. But if your community has space for things like this, it's really a no-brainer. You don't have to spend any money. You just got to make your roof space available, and it can throw off real benefits. By the way, I always mention, if any of you saw the movie The Joker, when he goes to Arkham Asylum, this is the Arkham Asylum building. Local government opportunities, a lot of vacant properties out there. 15 million vacant homes in America. We have a housing crisis, and we have 15 million vacant homes. Look for opportunities to do what Baltimore did. Package up your tax foreclosures, bring in a master developer. Financing support. People will always need money from their local government, as we've talked about. These deals have all gotten harder, the LIHTC deals, the new market deals. Tax credit pricing is coming down because of changes in the tax world, while construction expenses are going up, which produces real gaps. Local governments can be a very important part of filling that gap. Coordination planning. Know your local CDEs, your grant makers, your developers, your local foundations who are doing this work, and help bring them together. Convenings could be very powerful. Keep your standards up in terms of what people are bringing you, but try to reduce friction in permitting and approvals. That Brooklyn project, no one's here from the New York City Economic Development Corporation, right? So we can talk about them.
They're on our board.
On that one, really? Yeah. 5 years negotiating a roof lease. That's insanity. We had to make a political crisis out of this before they could get the bureaucrats out of the way and get things done. Don't be that government. Understand the commercial role in these deals. You are not just a government. Once you step in, you're making a loan, you're doing a lease. The market has expectations. Try to follow those and be a good commercial player as well as a good government for your residents. And finally, look for opportunities to coordinate with your neighbors. One of the big challenges in this stuff is it does get balkanized by jurisdiction, but so many of these projects can have benefits across jurisdictional lines. It's a great way to work together and take advantage of those. Thank you. That was 1 hour's worth of material in about 19 minutes.
Don't worry, I have some words about that. But I want to see if there's questions. We have time for questions before reception. She's bringing a mic.
Hi, Teresa Rich, Mayor of Farmington Hills, Michigan. So there's a big brouhaha in Michigan right now around zoning legislation. There is a god-awful package of 9 bills that the legislature, backed by the governor, backed by the Housing Association, I understand, or the builders, is trying to push through on zoning and basically preempting all local control. So I know, right? So the slide that you showed when you were talking about the problem is not zoning. Mm-hmm. Can you bring us back to that and help me with a site?
Absolutely. And
because we have something signed by 2,000 local electeds trying to.
I think it's insane. I mean, housing is the biggest investment in anything most people will make in their lives, and the easiest way for the government to alienate their voters is to mess with it. So here's the slide. This is the Federal Reserve Board of San Francisco Economic Letter 2026-03, Housing Affordability and Housing Demand. Yep.
Utah has the same thing, just so you know. Yeah. I'm running for governor, and our realtors are doing the same thing, so we just dodged that same bullet last week.
Well, they're trying to fast track it. It's just a whole lot of ugliness.
Hi, Dr. Luana Owens-Twaits, City Council member from Union City. I serve on our newly formed Downtown Development Authority as the chair, and we are in the process of soliciting RFPs just to get some investors, some plans in place. Do any of you do anything like that?
Yeah, we do a little bit of that, so we can talk about that. We also do one of the things that we do, and I'm not making it a sales pitches. You probably all are a little overwhelmed by all this. I understand that. That makes sense. We actually go through a full, elaborate development finance strategy and process. I'm a city planner by education, and I love those big, thick planning, documents we make. But I always flip to the back and say, "How are you going to pay for this?" And there's never that page. And so what we like to do is go to communities and say, we have that plan, now let's figure out how we're going to pay for it, how we create the tools and align them to what you're trying to achieve locally. So if anyone's ever interested in that, we do that as well.
I would say I have also done that in a previous life. In my current capacity at Arcturus, we don't make those plans, but we really do like to look at them in case there's something we want to invest in them. So I can help you with what we think makes a good plan, an investable one, and versus something that's a little bit tougher to put money into.
Great. I have a question this time. Commissioner Fitzbudhu of the great city of Oakland Park in Florida, right next to Fort Lauderdale, South Florida. You spoke about all the vehicles. There's one I didn't hear, CMF, Capital Magnet Fund.
That's a CDFI program, isn't it? Yeah.
That's correct.
So I'm not a big CDFI guy, but if you have a CDFI, and Jeannie will know a lot more about this, right? You can compete for the capital magnet funds.
Yeah.
You want to take that one?
Yeah. Well, it's somewhat in question. So before I came to NLC, I was at Treasury, working with the CDFI fund, and there are a list of programs with the CDFI fund that have been slowed down. But I can get you some more information on that. And I mean, that is not on your Hill Day agenda, but I would say put in a word about the CDFI fund. So New Markets tax credits were made permanent, but there's a whole list of other programs that potentially could cause CDFIs around the country to merge, or we could lose some of them. So a good program to keep in mind.
Knowledge. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Josie Singletary, Councilwoman, Riverdale, Georgia. This is a wealth of knowledge. My head is like spinning. Will we be able to get a copy of these PowerPoints?
Yes. So we have been live streaming, which is good because had we broken in different sessions, we wouldn't have caught everything. So we're going to message everyone because you're registered. We'll give you a live stream to have that and the slides. But because we had infrastructure issues with our bus today, I'm gonna work with our faculty here to bundle the rest of what we were going to do and roll that into NLCU because this is a lot. And you need a little bit more of it. So we're going to make sure we make that available.
Thank you.
Joe Weisensell, Rosemount, Minnesota. Curious if there's a corollary for other types of projects, more commercial or public facility type things, not involving housing. An example would be like an ice hockey arena.
Is there financing for it?
Well, I'm looking for where a private-public partnership. I'm just not sure the return. I'm just not sure of
all sorts.
How you get a return on that.
We could probably all rattle off a half dozen of those types of projects.
Just strictly like an ice hockey arena. Nothing attached to it.
We've done a cold storage facility, so it's cold.
That's close
That's
enough.
Similar. But we didn't have people. We didn't have people running or skating around on ice on it.
Publicly owned, privately owned.
We did a track and field facility in Louisville, Kentucky, too.
Public,
yeah,
for public use.
And as I mentioned last night, I'm going to send you what Raleigh's doing. It's a soccer stadium, but it's a tax increment grant.
Yeah. I mean, there's all sorts of structures. It could be public use, but you could have it be nonprofit owned and operated and charge user fees to pay back the debt. You can issue a 501c3 bond. Did y'all know you can issue bonds on behalf of qualified 501c3s? Every single YMCA you've ever been in the United States of America was financed this way. So that's a perfect example. You ever go to one of these mega baseball places where your kids play like 37 baseball games over 4 days? Every one of the, me too. I've been to those every weekend. Those are all financed using a TIF, potentially tax-exempt bond type of structure. Every one of them. Yeah.
That's the 201 version. The 101 version that we sometimes do. We actually have an investment in a office building, which I know is not the same, but let me get to my point. In Anacostia, around the corner from here, and essentially the way that worked was the D.C. city government had a large OPEX budget, but not a big CAPEX budget. So they said, hey, we really need to build some new office building. We don't have the financing to actually build the building. Can you, Arcturus, put the money in, build the building, and then we, DC, will sign a 10-year lease on that building. And so that was a way for us to get comfortable with the risk and the return of it, a way for them to, build this facility that was used for office space, but you can imagine something similar for an ice rink where you have some sort of public or nonprofit entity essentially leasing it, and you agree on those terms in advance so that the investors get comfortable with it.
That's what we're kind of waiting on as a financing model where we could actually go out and, I guess, bond through our economic development group, but I was just thinking of a different model, I guess.
You're in Georgia? You
Minnesota.
said Minnesota? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I didn't put
They
those
play it
together.
everywhere now.
Hello, thank you. Learned a lot. A little confused by some of the options. I'm Leo Groner, City Council, West Lynn, Oregon. We've got some bankrupt paper plants that are now closed, old buildings full of asbestos, and associated with those plants were some chemical settling ponds that are now brownfields. But this area overlooks the falls of the Willamette River, so it's a beautiful scenic area with that one eyesore blocking the view. Any suggestions on what can happen from both a finance and a project point of view?
I'm curious what you guys think. To me, that sounds like a great public-private partnership opportunity where the local governments invest in some site remediation, so you don't have to put all of that cost onto the redevelopment.
Well, you're going to have to. So that the key to finance is there's a barrier, right? And your barrier is environmental. So instead of trying to solve for whatever's going to go on there next, solve for how you're going to remove that environmental. And so just to that point, you say, we're willing to enter into a public-private partnership. We'll use TIF, which is legal in Oregon, and we'll go after Superfund or EPA brownfield cleanup funds and assessment. We're going to do everything we can to meet you at this point so that spurs a developer, a partner, an Arcturus, a developer, or someone to build their vision for what they'd bring on privately. I'd also say if you go up to Washington State, what is Rodney Wentz group, Cascadia? They did like the Cascadia wood pulp project up there. It's a very similar challenge. I can send you his link to that, but it's a similar project where huge environmental, and they were able to take an old site and revitalize it to something else. Yep.
Hello, Keisha Chapman from Mayor of East Point, Georgia. We're working on a site for like a recreation center, for a larger recreation center pool. Do you have any examples or case studies about how those types of things get funded, and or what your approach would be to something like that?
Go ahead, you can do that.
I mean, rec centers I typically think of as being in the local Parks and Rec budget as part of the town's capital planning. But yeah, there are other solutions like we talked about with the hockey rink. I mean, you could do it on a build and lease back basis where someone finances it privately very easily. If it's in a good location. Yeah.
Hi, how are you? Maria Rodriguez from the city of Pembroke Pines in Florida. I think I wanted to allude to what she had mentioned about Michigan. I assume it's very similar to what we call the Live Local Act in Florida, where the state basically preempts local government and allows companies and developers to come in and build basically whatever they want with like very, very few restrictions. We've fortunately not had any of those come into our community and have worked with some developers, but to do other projects. But are there other states that kind of have fallen into that trap of the preemption by the state in the goals of building more housing? But also then how do we talk to the developers so that they don't go the Live Local Act like realm and actually work with the cities? What are some of the incentives that they by themselves could not get a hold of? And I am sure it's in all of the slides, but if you could highlight a few, I'd appreciate it.
I'm happy to talk in our model. When we come to a particular city or a place and we set up this public-private partnership, this place-based investment program, it starts with a conversation about what are the types of things that you want to see investment in. So in Erie, for example, when we first went to the city and we said, well, what do you want to build? And they said, we really want to revitalize the downtown. And we said, okay, so what do you want? Do you want some affordable housing in the downtown? They said, absolutely not. Like 90% of the housing stock in the entire city is already naturally occurring affordable. We want something that's actually a little bit higher end so that we can bring in people that have a little bit more spending power into the downtown, which was that wasn't what we expected. We were, ready to start thinking about affordable housing. And the reason that we have that conversation is because we're taking some of their money. Like, they are a capital partner to us, and the basic agreement is, if you're coming to be a partial investor in this, then we have to play by your rules. Now, of course, there are other rules, like we need to make sure that those investments are financially feasible. And, there are market conditions right now, interest rates, development costs that are high. So it's, we want to try to thread that needle. But we have a very intentional model where we are trying to meet the community needs, where they are. Now, that said, a lot of the time, we also hear that the community need is more housing. The estimates now are, I think, up to 7 million units that the country is short in terms of affordable housing units. Obviously, it varies by jurisdiction. It varies by different think tanks and research estimates. But that is a pretty substantial national need, and a lot of times, we have the opposite problem where local leaders are telling us we really need to build more affordable housing, but then when we try to find specific sites to build that, we get a lot of local pushback. And so sometimes there's even disagreement within some of those communities, and that's difficult for us as an investor, because then we say, look, it's just not worth the hassle. Like, if you guys can't figure this out, we get $1.4 billion of investment proposals that we look at every year. Like, we're just going to go, frankly, and do something else.
Hi, Nika Peterson, City Council north of Salt Lake City. In the previous session, we talked about some of the going after grants that are more infrastructure related. But as far as projects and redevelopment ones, do any of you see models where you have communities that are looking for partnerships, but it is still very much infrastructure based? We were a base community that had stuff from World War II era that was shuttered. That land was sold off and is privately held, and the money from that comes in. But our very small community was asked to shoulder all of the infrastructure from that, which is World War II era, and it has sat there. So there's no investment or money, tax base, to be able to maintain it. And so for 70 years, a small bedroom community with failed manufacturing was the one that shouldered it. And I think the most current estimates were something like just $120 million to bring that current. And so we're looking at, okay, how do you leverage every single dollar? We'll go after and chase, and our NLC participation reflects our desire to become much more grant literate. But I look at projects and it's like, okay, I'm looking at how many funds I've got that were old CDRAs, old things like that, where we actually have money that we need to spend in the next 5 years. We would love to do some of these things, like let's leverage everything we've got. But my concern is when it's the less sexy infrastructure lifts, it's not housing, it's not some of these other things right there, and the land is still privately held, but a third of our city's municipal systems go right underneath this right here.
Does the landowner want to redevelop it vertically, private?
No. It's old.
That might be a hard spot to start with.
Well, it's difficult. It would be amazing if you could do it. Right now, all of the manufacturing has just about died, but they're very happy to sit at 98% occupancy on warehousing. So you've lost this incredible economic engine. So you're watching property tax, all that other kind of stuff right there. So we're looking at how do you, as a municipality, try and shore up. I mean, I need the luck of the Carolinas here to come in with our hundreds of millions of dollars in infrastructure ask. Now, that being said, ownership has just changed. They love that. It would be even to come into them and say, look, well, I love for you that you're getting $1.50 in rents on warehousing and you're at capacity. Something big enough to say, you have a third of a city landmass right here. You could do something amazing, to do industrial conversion on it, but you would need a scale of them to help them see that you could do something besides being a landlord. But it would be such a significantly high one, and that's that delta for us as municipality to have partners that could come in, but you'd be looking at the hundreds of millions of dollars. Or does somebody still really like water pipes that much?
Just keep raising their water rates until the warehouses are no longer economic, and then they have to sell.
I mean, this is going to sound weird, but one of the positive things is if you're starting off in let's call it a district for now, and you decide to put a TIF district on that, you're starting off with a very low base. Oh, yeah. So everything's going to be increment. Yeah. And that might be a way to talk to them about modeling and show them, listen, you're not paying a lot of taxes right now, because they're going to say, why would I redo all this? Then I'm going to pay. Now we're going to use your taxes to invest in that non-sexy infrastructure so that then they can go vertical. I think it's about like when you use public finance tools, it's not a day, it's not a week, it's not a month. It's years of education and champion building and pivot and getting them to pivot from their closed-minded viewpoint to one of, you could make a lot more money and we could bring $120 million of infrastructure financing, right? That sounds pretty cool when you put it that way, right?
What about some kind of special assessment?
Special assessments.
Right?
Yeah, you could do a special assessment on top of it. I mean, you could actually make it, if it sounds like what it is and there's opportunity, you could actually, on the back end of the financing, you have a very strong case because you're starting at almost nothing. So everything's increment. You could put a special assessment on it, a surrounding special assessment even for the benefits of those that are across the street, that are next door. And you could actually master plan it using those public finance philosophies as your way to get the developer or the owner to get excited about it. You want to make $2 today, or do you want to make $10 million in a year? Kind of showing them the pathway. But that's hard to do, no doubt.
All right, so we are going to have a reception on the 9th floor, so up one floor on the terrace. And again, we're going to email you the link so you have the live stream, the slides. We're going to go back and reconfigure these classes a little bit more in depth. And then I would just like to ask you all to do something. When we send that to you, if you've got a project that you've talked about here or you didn't have an opportunity to talk about, shoot that back to us so that we can figure out how to integrate that into what we do next. That'll be very helpful. We really appreciate you all being here. You've already gained an advantage over all the other cities back at the hotel by being here and participating. So we appreciate that, and we'll go up and enjoy some refreshments. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. It was actually kind of fun. It sure worked.